There are different types of love in the world that do not depend on social status, and this power, like in a fairy tale, can overcome any obstacles and give a real miracle. Or is it the kind of love where race and appearance don't matter, and princesses, following the call of their hearts, fall in love with monsters, turning them into handsome princes with their feelings? And there is also a kind of love that defies time and circumstances, when the lover, with tenderness and care, leads his beloved under an umbrella through the rain, protecting her from adversity. The blonde man with light eyes that seemed to reflect sunlight looked up with incomprehension and slight surprise, as if trying to find answers to incomprehensible questions hidden from others. The maiden with hair as blue as the night sky looked down in surprise. Her eyes were wide open, and her mouth was slightly open in genuine amazement, as if what she saw was completely unexpected. This was the beginning of their unusual love, when a strange, mysterious girl with a slight smile sat astride a noble aristocrat, as if playing with fate and breaking all conceivable rules of decency, drawn by an inexplicable feeling. The beautiful city of Leuta, surrounded by majestic mountains and golden plains, was the land of the gods, where every corner breathed grandeur and magic, and legends about its origins were passed down from generation to generation. Suddenly, a desperate cry was heard in the busy square, causing everyone to freeze. It was the voice of a man calling by the name of Eli's, begging his companion to stop, as if his life depended on it. The cloaked maiden ran forward at a rapid pace, her voice joyful and enthusiastic as she shouted out that she wanted to enjoy the magnificent scenery that lay before her. Taking a deep breath, the charming beauty said with a mysterious smile that freedom, like a bright glow, sparkled right in front of her, beckoning and encouraging her to bold actions. It was a world of people that emerged straight from women's dreams, filled with magic and amazing possibilities, where every desire found its reality. Eli, the goddess of plants with long green hair and large expressive eyes, was full of joy when she saw the land called Rhodia, filled with the life-giving power of nature. Clutching the tender sprout to her chest, the beauty chirped about her dream of traveling to another continent to explore its amazing landscapes and culture, but regretted that there was too little time to fulfill this cherished desire. Holding the tender plant tightly in her hand, she confidently ordered it to wake up faster, believing that its awakening would fill the space around it with amazing energy and the magical charm of nature. The cute creature woke up, opened its big eyes, and smiled. It was the sprout of a small monster that emitted an unusual aura and was a faithful companion of its escaped mistress. The joyful maiden promised her little friend that they would definitely manage to escape from this terrible place together, full of hope and determination to overcome all obstacles on their way to freedom. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, a tall figure in snow-white clothes appeared behind her, gracefully holding a dangerous weapon in her hands, and with a cold voice ordered the goddess of plants to stop, causing the woman's heart to freeze from fear and misunderstanding. Eli froze in horror, unable to comprehend how the familiar figure could catch up with them so quickly, and an anxious premonition overwhelmed her, like the shadow of impending danger. Jupiter, a magnificent figure with dazzling blonde hair and deep blue eyes, commanded his mate with majestic dignity not to move. He was the king of heaven and the lord of the gods, which added to his power. The girl, silently listening to the indignant words of her fellow man, who offered her the best conditions among all possible options, surprised him with a rude answer that left an unpleasant aftertaste in the atmosphere, like an unexpected storm in a cloudless sky. Eli, with a vicious determination in her voice, stopped the king, reminding him that she had spent 200 years in captivity, experiencing terrible loneliness and deprivation. They literally exhausted the girl, starving her, giving her only a few tiny pieces of bread and a couple of sips of water, as if testing the limits of endurance and patience, enjoying the suffering of others. All the higher powers pointed their fingers at her, considering the goddess of plants to be the embodiment of a curse that would bring humiliation to the whole world, as an inevitable disaster hanging over humanity. Whenever something bad happened in the human world, everyone would blame the girl called Eli without hesitation, as if any misfortunes were invariably connected to her presence. She could only cry bitterly, helplessly feeling the deep loneliness and burning resentment that squeezed her heart more and more each day, as if the whole world had betrayed and turned away, leaving her in impenetrable darkness without hope of consolation. The lady's eyes flashed with an angry fire, and a cry of despair burst from her chest. Had they done anything good for her during all this time, or had they only brought suffering and insults? The maiden could not come to her senses from her indignation. How could one even allow the thought that the goddess of plants, the creator of life, was capable of destroying the world that she herself had nurtured and made green? Clutching his face in despair, Jupiter prayed for the lady to calm down immediately, pull herself together, and return back to the isolation room before the situation got completely out of control and brought about irreversible consequences. Standing there coldly and emotionlessly, Eli silently listened that they should return before the others learned of her escape and decided to execute the little girl, condemning her to a terrible fate for the sake of others' fears and mistakes. With a cruel smile, the goddess confessed to her brother that she was able to find peace only when she escaped from the isolation room and had no intention of returning back, enjoying the taste of freedom and a new life. The god pointed his weapon at his sister and confidently declared that he would take the scoundrel by force to the isolation ward to protect her from the wrath of the other deities, who were ready to strike for her unheard-of insolence and disobedience. Eli was quick to remind everyone that she also possessed great power and raised her hand to control the plants, calling them to life and demonstrating her power to all who dared to underestimate her. Vines with sharp thorns quickly wrapped around the man's weapon, like a living creature, ready at any moment to prick and disarm its opponent, demonstrating the beauty's strength and power over the plant world. The lady laughed and said that she intended to spend her last days among men, and that therefore her brother should avoid her presence, unless he wished to be exposed to the blow of a woman's wrath, which might fall upon him at any moment. Without thinking twice, the beauty quickly jumped off the cliff, deciding not to be captured and preferring a risky step to freedom rather than being caught and humiliated. The last words, spoken with complete sincerity and full of despair, sounded like this. Being in this gloomy and gray city seemed disgusting to her, and she was happy that she would finally be able to escape from all this, starting a new life. Jupiter clenched his teeth in anger, his face contorted with tension, as if a storm was raging in his soul, ready to break out and destroy everything in its path, like a tornado that leaves nothing alive. He looked with hatred at the empty space where the fugitive had recently stood, and angrily shouted her name, full of anger and contempt, for daring to leave their world, as if it were the greatest betrayal. As she fell, her green hair fluttered in the wind, resembling streams of light moss that danced to the rhythm of a gentle gust, adding a mysterious beauty and lightness to the air, so that it seemed that nature itself was tenderly embracing the falling figure. The beauty herself, enchanted by her ease of flight, suddenly realized that now she needed to find a way not to crash, realizing the seriousness of the situation and relying on her instincts to avoid the inevitable danger. She had to find a human body that didn't yet have a soul in order to fill it with her essence, seeking to gain the ability to exist in this world and avoid loneliness. The beauty began to quickly shake her head in different directions, as if in a panic trying to understand what would help her, looking for at least some kind of hint or support in this difficult and confusing situation. Suddenly, in the distance, the aura of a man in the castle, who was soon to be born, shone, like a harbinger of a great event that could change the destinies of many and fill the world with new hopes and dreams. The lady quietly looked through the window, where the maid was giving orders to bring more towels, for Rosalita had been poisoned and was in critical condition, causing alarm and concern to all who knew and loved her. Inside the house there was a couple, where the man was supporting the woman, who was pregnant. The man's caring hands were gently helping her take each step, giving her confidence and warmth in this special moment. Eli smiled, deciding that this would be her new body, in which she would be able to experience many amazing moments. Then she added that in the human world, there are important things without which a good life becomes completely impossible. The lady was well aware that money, gold coins, status, and honor were extremely important to them, since these elements ensured a comfortable existence and determined their place in society, opening doors to new opportunities and privileges. The plant took on a serious expression, as if realizing the importance of the situation, and with deep understanding agreed with its owner, as if it completely shared her thoughts and feelings, ready to support her at any moment. Throwing herself happily inside, Eli flew swiftly towards the lady who was soon to become a new mother, filling the space around her with joy and anticipation of a new beginning. A sudden flash of thunder filled the sky, startling the goddess, who lost her balance and fell to the ground, which was not only a physical fall, but also a symbol of vulnerability to the power of nature. The little pet squealed in fear when separated from its owner, its touching cry sounding as if it was expressing all its anxiety and worry about separation. The fingers of the hand moved towards the plant with tenderness and caution, trying to embrace it and return it to its warm palms to protect and surround it with care, providing it with safety and comfort. But it was too late. The maiden's fall could no longer be stopped, and at that moment, the sweet pet, who had always been nearby, was too far away to come to the rescue and prevent the tragedy that threatened to separate them. The blue-haired aristocrat, as if in a dream, quietly and with a gentle smile, watched the man lying on the bed and crying with happiness. Her gaze, full of understanding and warmth, illuminated the atmosphere, filling the room with a sense of peace. Rosalita woke up, and in the light of the morning sun, she looked truly mesmerizing. Her blue hair flowed over her shoulders like ocean waves, and her bright red eyes blinked sleepily, giving her appearance mystery and charm. The pregnant mother sat nearby, beaming with joy, covering her mouth with one hand and gently stroking her large belly with the other, as if connecting with the new life inside. The goddess, overcome with deep disappointment at having possessed the wrong person, began to cough up blood, filling her heart with bitterness and anxiety about the lost opportunity. The man standing next to the ladies, with obvious curiosity and slight concern, asked the lady who had just woken up whether she really remembered absolutely nothing about what had happened in the last few days. Rosalita slowly shook her head, as if wanting to express her doubts and dissatisfaction, thereby demonstrating her complete disagreement with what was happening. The woman standing next to her turned out to be the Marchioness of Durman, and with a warm smile on her face, she reassured her daughter, emphasizing that the main thing in this difficult situation was that she had survived and had finally woken up, filled with hope for the future. Wiping the tears from her face, the mother, barely containing her emotions, whispered that she was immensely glad that her daughter was okay, and that the poor little girl was feeling well again. However, the goddess hidden in the body of a man realized that she found herself in a very strange situation, full of unexpected turns and mysteries that required careful consideration. Usually, the body already belonged to another soul, and therefore it was impossible for another being to move into it, which created additional difficulties and obstacles for the flower mistress who found herself in such an unusual position. It all came down to the fact that the previous owner of this body, Rosalita, had died quite recently, shortly before the events described, leaving behind an empty shell ready for a new entity. This delightful beauty with magical blue hair, possessing dazzling beauty, a kind heart and grace, was invariably called a heavenly angel because her warmth and charm conquered the hearts of everyone. 7 years ago, as a very young girl, the girl took part in the evacuation of people during a terrible disaster, demonstrating amazing courage and determination despite her age. Since then, all the inhabitants have continually praised the bravery and courage of this young maiden, admiring the great fearlessness and selflessness shown in the darkest hour of a terrible disaster. Her hand barely touched the surface of the water, and in this calm reflection, the image of a lady with an unusual, mesmerizing hair color became clearly visible, as if nature itself decided to capture the mysterious beauty in the mirror of water. However, there were also those people who did not feel sympathy for the kind beauty, and one lady, putting her hand to her face, questioningly asked her companion what was the reason for such a noise coming from the crowd. At the gatherings, the rude noblewoman invariably insulted her rival, claiming that she was more like a commoner than a true lady, using her words as a weapon to humiliate her dignity and assert her own superiority. Rosalita, in response to such insults, silently smiled, experiencing deep inner peace, and could not learn to hate others, despite the anger and aggression emanating from her rival. The goddess, finding herself in a new body, thoughtfully lowered her eyes, wondering what could have caused such a tragic death of such a sweet soul, whose life seemed to be full of light and kindness. Looking at her reflection in the mirror, Rosalita realized that she was in the body of a person who was her complete opposite, and this realization filled her with complex feelings, forcing her to think about how she should adapt to her new life. The tired aristocrat, feeling her strength waning, dropped her head heavily onto the table, allowing herself to forget for a moment about all the worries and difficulties that had haunted the beauty in recent days, and to immerse herself in silence. Sitting up in bed, Rosalita breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that the people around her loved her, including family and friends who saw the girl as a kind person, and this realization gave her hope and warmth. Barefoot, she stepped carefully onto the cold floor, and the cold contact made the goddess shudder, reminding her that the world around her had become completely new and unfamiliar to her, requiring adaptation and courage. The woman's hand slowly rose into the air, and her slender fingers, gracefully curved as if in a dance, gracefully reached towards the heavens, creating the impression of lightness and weightlessness. Eli couldn't take her eyes off the mirror, admiring her new appearance, which transformed her, opening up new horizons and giving her self-confidence, and each reflection only increased her admiration for herself. The family of the blue-haired maiden, possessing considerable wealth and high status, occupied a strong position in aristocratic society, attracting attention with its magnificence and nobility. Suddenly, the goddess's pet let out a shrill sound, drawing attention to itself. It yearned for its mistress to use her divine power, allowing it to sense the magic emanating from that great being. A light suddenly began to shine in her hand, taking the shape of a star, emitting a soft and attractive glow, thereby beckoning to itself and filling the surrounding space with magic and warmth. The pet plant enthusiastically pointed out their cherished dream, in which they could go on an amazing journey and discover many more of their fellows, while enjoying the beauty of the world around them. Together, they went outside, where a light breeze pleasantly touched their skin, bringing with it freshness and vigor. As they moved confidently forward along the picturesque route, colorful coughing into her fist, Eli decided that she should first check all the plants around her to make sure they were in good condition. Touching her fingers to the delicate leaves, she asked the plant how it felt, trying to catch its mood, as if hoping for an answer from nature. Listening to the beauty carefully touched the bush, not afraid of its thorns, and began to take care of it, trying to pay it. She didn't even notice how someone else had been watching her from behind the window the whole time. The man approached his relative from behind and quietly asked how she was feeling, thereby greatly. Rosalita turned around, flushed with embarrassment, her beautiful face flushed with shame as she met the gaze of the man who had caught. The guy, who looked remarkably like her, smiled sweetly, and his happy smile indicated that the Derman family's eldest son, Benjamin, looked away awkwardly and explained that he had been very worried about his sister. The lady covered her face with her hand, unable to take her eyes off the handsome man. Feeling her heart beat faster from his charm, the man placed his hands on his relative's shoulders and gently ordered them to return to her chambers, where, after putting his sister to bed, Benjamin apologized with When her brother asked if she really didn't remember anything, Eli responded with a slight concern, asking him if she had forgotten anything important that could shed light on their conversation. Fidgeting with his fingers in his lap, Benjamin dryly explained that there was an important. The man refused to talk about what had happened to her in the past, insisting that it would only bring her. Soon, her brother left, and Rosalita was left alone, lying silently in bed. Without thinking twice, she jumped out of bed again and assumed a sitting position, trying to collect her thoughts and prepare for the. Disappointed that Benjamin hadn't told her anything important, she clutched the sheet in her hands. The girl's face was serious and gloomy, as the new life was again beginning to resemble the past, full of ice. It was decided to find out at any cost what happened to the previous owner of this body. Chloe, the personal maid, stood with her arms folded across her chest. She reminded the lady that she was the one responsible for the arts and culture of this city. All citizens looked at her with hope, and sometimes with anxiety. Rosalita was a member of a highly spiritual and developed family, where knowledge, culture, and traditions. Before the maid left, the beauty asked her to stay and tell her more about something important. Hoping that Placing her hand on her chest, Rosalita asked what kind of person she had been before her memory loss. Trying to reconnect, covering her mouth with her hand, the maid was shocked that her mistress was so kind. Realizing that behind the memory loss, there were invisible virtues. Lying in the bathroom, the girl waited for a response from the maid, lost in thoughts about the embarrassed maid politely asked the lady to wait outside the bathroom for a while. Eli clutched her head, feeling angry and disappointed that she had once again missed the opportunity to reveal the truth about the— It started to rain, and the trees began to make noise, rustling their leaves and knocking drops on their branches. A drop, reminiscent of a snowflake, fell on the delicate finger of the beauty, which, sparkling in the rays, mesmerized. Eli watched the rain fall slowly in streams, unable to take her eyes off its melodic dance. Without thinking twice, she decided to go outside with her pet, an unusual plant. At this time, the mother turned to her eldest son, who was standing. The boy worriedly asked his mother why she was dressed like that, because it was cold outside now. The woman was worried about the condition of her youngest daughter, while the mother was wiping away her tears, the maid screamed in horror. Rosalita, as if nothing had happened, ran barefoot on the cold ground. In horror and shock, the Derman family gaped and froze. Rosalita, hearing the cry, stopped and turned to her family, not understanding. The eldest son's hand was placed on the mother's shoulder to calm her down, and quietly asked. The man promised that he would talk to his sister and convince the young lady to return to the house. Rosalita stood there, dripping wet, clutching her hand. The boy covered his sister with a cape so that she would not be cold or wet, and brushing his wet hair away from his forehead, he vowed that no one would dare. With a smile, the boy grabbed his sister's hand and said that they should go to a dry place. He no longer allowed his family to go through the shame of everyone discussing the lady behind her back. Deciding to protect her from gossip and Rosalita, confused and upset, lay on the bed, feeling depressed because her family wouldn't let her go anywhere, and Chloe stood next to her. With a sigh, she tried to explain to her mistress that she was still too weak and sick to participate in any activities, hoping that covering her face with a pillow, the beauty whispered that she was absolutely healthy, trying to hide her true feelings. But deep down, she understood. After all, having entered this body as a goddess, she was now supposed to become immortal, gaining strength and power that would allow her to— Stubbornly folding her arms across her chest, the maid refused to take part in her mistress's escape. With a pleading look in her eyes, Rosalita begged her maid to let her go outside for a bit, since the walls of the house were literally oppressing her. The maid eventually agreed, and so the hooded lady stood in the square. With an excited smile and a light in her eyes, the aristocrat looked at the city of art and culture, holding her hood with her hand. The servant asked the mistress not to go far. In the distance, in the crowd, stood a fragile-looking young noblewoman who stood out with her beauty and grace. The nobles standing nearby were loudly discussing the Derman family. They laughed and shouted loudly that the figure in the distance could not have been Derman. A man with a large mustache and a bald spot shouted loudly that the marquise should have raised her. After this, he added that it would be better if the girl were locked up for 100 years. Maybe then she would— Chloe clenched her fist, angry at the impudence of the local aristocrats who allowed them. Rosalita herself was shaking with anger and rage, unable to use her plant power without arousing suspicion from those around her. Therefore, she decided to act differently, and, hiding in a cloak, went to the aristocrat with apologies. With a smile on her face, Eli turned to the young man and asked him to tell her the details of the story they had been taught. The man burst out laughing at how funny the noblewoman was acting, who seemed to have completely forgotten what shame was. The man put his hand to his mouth, made a sarcastic face, and asked if there was anything so unusual going on behind the doors of Derman's house that it was causing such a scandal. It was scary to imagine what the former Rosalita had gone through, who, only by trying and— The gods also pointed their fingers at the poor goddess of plants, blaming her for all the troubles. The maiden decided to stand up for herself, and meeting the evil nobleman's gaze, the lady leaned back, wondering in bewilderment how this pathetic man dared to free the mark. Pointing his finger irritably at the impudent girl, the man shouted loudly that she was obliged to behave quietly and modestly. Hearing the words that her father had disowned her, the girl could not hold back her laughter. The servant assigned to protect the mistress stood nearby, amazed at the behavior of her mistress. Derman family was the only one who truly cared for their relative. They were kind, considerate, and warm-hearted people who always showed care, and like a majestic goddess with long dark hair, holding an ancient basin in her hands, who in the distant past helped her, giving her support and guiding her on the right path, enveloping her with care and wisdom. Grabbing the impudent man by the arm, Eli jerked him closer to her, intending to immediately say everything that had accumulated right in his face. Without thinking twice, she raised her fist, preparing to strike the nobleman. Her gaze burned with determination, and a fragile hand touched the aristocrat's forehead, and he winced in displeasure, feeling the unexpected audacity in her movement. As through tears of humiliation, the nobleman swore that he would make the lady bitterly regret her action. But Eli, without fear, confidently pointed her finger at the scoundrel. Her eyes glowed scarlet, giving her the appearance. The aristocrat fell to his knees in fear, bitter tears streaming down his face, and he began to sob. The small houses of the settlement were comfortably located among green trees. Taking off her hood, the lady spoke loudly and confidently. Chloe, looking down, said that in the past, the lady had not done anything bad. Rosalita waved her hand and decided not to continue the conversation, noticing that the servant seemed upset. Suddenly, a dishonest aristocrat appeared, surrounded by his men in black, and pointing at the people with obvious disdain, he gave the mercenaries an imperious order to seize them, leaving them no choice, and without thinking twice, Rosalita took to her heels, and her face. The mercenaries did not have time to react and, confused, began to look around the area in shock, vainly searching for the missing. The nobleman was extremely dissatisfied with the workers he had hired, and, raising his voice, noticing the maid rushing past in the distance at an astonishing speed, the man pointed sharply at her, drawing the attention of those around him. Rosalita quickly hid around the corner, while the stupid mercenaries, not noticing her, ran in the other direction. Eli was left alone, losing sight of both the maid and the knight as she ran away, feeling a growing sense of unease and worry that she might have lost them forever. And every moment seemed. And now, the further she went into the city, the more there the poor sat on the cold ground, worn out and exhausted, looking as Rosalita suddenly met the gaze of the scoundrel again, to whom the grown man brought a large box full of. The aristocrat acted like a true villain, flaunting gold and where the man held a piece of paper in his hands, on which was written a list of humanitarian aid, including necessary resources. The maiden's anger knew no bounds when she realized that this scoundrel stole aid from the poor and then mercilessly sold it, condemning many to suffering and deprivation. Moreover, this man was also engaged in the sale of living creatures and people, which was in flagrant violation of the laws and all norms. The man with the bandage on his face hastened to calm the gentleman, informing him that they had managed to catch the maid. Eli was filled with anger and indignation when she learned of this, as selling other people was with a smile on her face. The maiden decided that it was time for a thorough investigation to uncover all the dark. The man in the formal suit asked the guest with slight mistrust for an invitation, by which the noblewoman crossed her arms over her chest, and with a confident expression on her. At once the man's demeanor changed to good-natured, and he respectfully handed her a mask to hide his face, as if he The lady put the mask on her face and headed inside, silently promising that no one would dare to do dark. The place resembled a dungeon. Dark chains hung from the ceiling, and candles burned with a dim. The lady in the cloak walked confidently behind the escort, passing by the cells in which she was looking for her maid out of the corner of her eye, when something suddenly caught her attention. In one of the cages, she noticed something familiar that made her heart beat faster, and it was a sign. There was a locked door nearby, covered in dust and cobwebs, which seemed to have. And when she decided to go up to find out what was hidden there, the escort stopped the guest with his hand, saying. The man hurried to hurry the lady, saying that the event was about to begin, but she had already found the place where she wanted to go. Suddenly, a sharp sound was heard in the distance, which touched the guy's neck, and he instantly lost consciousness, falling to the floor, as if an invisible veil had been pulled off. Eli stared at her hand in awe, feeling a surge of power fill her with energy and confidence. It seemed like she had finally found the power she had always dreamed of, and then, humming a melody full of joy, she headed towards the locked door, which she was strictly forbidden to enter. Her body was filled with excitement. Suddenly, a man's hand reached out from behind towards the girl, forcing her to turn around with unexpected fear. And at that moment, the figure in the red cloak grabbed the beauty by the shoulders and pressed her against. The woman, hiding her face behind a mask, began to interrogate, explaining that she was interested in what exactly Derman's daughter was doing in this mysterious place, full of. Wanting to break free, the girl tried to strike the stranger, but she quickly reacted, putting out her hand to. The blonde-haired girl staggered back, holding her hand tightly to her face and mask, trying to protect herself from the impending threat, while the man's wig fell off his head, and instead of a girl, there was a guy there, who looked at the— Eli jokingly pointed her finger at the stranger and asked if he preferred women's clothing, but the guy did not appreciate her joke, and, angrily responding, the mystical man was a real handsome man with high cheekbones and black eyebrows. The swordmaster's hand responded with a sharp pain and turned red after the girl's blow, which made him— The irritated, handsome man added that such a young girl should not have wandered alone in such scary and dangerous places, emphasizing that the risk could have serious consequences for the woman's safety. The lady, however, decided to attack back, asking questions about who the strange guy was and what he was doing. The guy, who introduced himself as Thomas, may have made it up to create a certain image or to hide. After that, Eli told that she came here because her mustard seed was stolen and locked in one of the cells. The man was shocked that instead of asking the Marquise for help, she decided to go alone to save her servants. Suddenly, the guy started talking on the earpiece to his assistant, explaining that it turned out the handsome man agreed to help his new companion, realizing that she would not return home anyway and would continue her search for the mustard seed. Not giving up hope, the maiden left for a short time, but soon returned with a large hammer, which became a powerful weapon that could help them defend themselves from potential threats. Turning away from his interlocutor, Thomas ordered her to follow him and not to lag behind. Confidently they walked silently through the dark dungeon, the echo of their footsteps on the stone tiles creating an ominous— The people behind bars were kneeling and begging for help, their eyes full of despair and hope. One of them grabbed the stranger by the cloak and insistently asked her to free them, looking at her with his big eyes from under his dirty clothes, full of fear and hope, as if the goddess of plants could not help but remember how she herself had previously— But no one answered, and the bars separated one room from another. The man, noticing that his companion had fallen into shock and horror, hurried her, confidently saying that The maiden, dissatisfied with this decision, waved her hands and asked what— The people behind bars asked, if not for salvation, then at least for help to loosen the shackles that weighed on them. They all stretched out their hands to the strangers in cloaks, who could save them, promising to pay, ready to do anything to regain their— Eli refused to leave without even trying to save those unfortunate enough to be— The man's hand, full of determination, reached out to the woman's, trying to capture this moment forever, not wanting to let her go for a moment, while their— Suddenly, he grabbed the girl's hands tightly, saying decisively that he would not allow her to waste time on the prisoners, because they had to leave this place as soon as possible before they were noticed. Pushing her companion away from her, the maiden angrily screamed that he was allowing himself such impudent actions, not realizing the price of their actions and what influence— The grip of his hand on the noblewoman's wrist only tightened, and the veins began to bulge. The man tried to convince the beauty that these people were not the only ones who were being held captive and sold, and that she could not cope with this situation on her own, needing his help and support to get out of this dangerous situation. Eli cut him off by saying that she had no big plans and just wanted to save her pride by leaving everything else behind. But there was more to her voice. Uncertainty about— Actors in plays never passed by if they saw evil acts, because for them, every manifestation of injustice became not only a challenge, but also an opportunity to convey moral lessons to the audience, Therefore, the maiden often envied them, watching as the rescuer extended his hand to the victim. Noticing how sadly the lady lowered her head, Thomas asked about her well-being, trying to understand what was troubling the woman. Suddenly, the handsome man's attention was caught by a voice in his earpiece. Behind them was a door, from which a loud voice came, gradually approaching, filling the space with an alarming atmosphere. Realizing that they had finally been spotted, the man ordered his companion to leave while he decided to try to detain them. Eli, however, was in no hurry to obey, wanting to help the prisoner. There was no limit to her admiration, and the aristocrat tried to convince her interlocutor again. However, the noblewoman only stubbornly grabbed the bars with her hands, wanting to break them, full of determination. Obediently, the bars parted, and a passage opened for the captives, who could now calmly walk out to freedom, gaining the opportunity to leave this dark place. At this time, the merchants were discussing a new product that had recently entered the market. Suddenly, an explosion came from behind them, shaking the air and making hearts skip a beat in fear. It was Eli and her companion who destroyed the wall with a large— One of the guards started to scream for help, but then a blow flew into his face, forcing him to shut up. The man was sent flying by a frail lady who, gathering all her strength, suddenly knocked him down. Thomas stood to the side, watching in shock as the guards were massacred. Unable to comprehend how the gentle Eli ran past him, he promised that he would deal with all the noise and mess she had made earlier later. Although he was all soon more people arrived, and the voice commanded to catch the invaders who had come here and caused. Before the guy could finish speaking, a beauty with a weapon pounced on him, causing him to raise his hand in fear to defend himself. Feeling how adrenaline seeing the spirit leave the man, Thomas awkwardly asked which of the two was the real villain, unsure how to take this mystical moment and what it might mean. Suddenly, a mysterious and almost whispering voice sounded in the nobleman's ear, which said that he had managed to. This unexpected news attracted the attention of the lady standing behind, who, Eli, without holding back her emotions, screamed indignantly when her companion. Suddenly, a poor little boy stopped the goddess by grabbing her green cloak. He muttered quietly that there were also captured people in the next room, his voice shaking with excitement as he realized that their fates might depend. As Thomas shouted loudly towards the lady, he called her a hammer, meaning that she always carried a huge weapon with her. There, another guard pounced on the pair from behind, wanting to strike and regain control. But then the man was knocked out by a powerful blow from the evil beauty, whose rage and the guards lay unconscious at the feet of the lady, drooling on the floor, leaving behind a grim picture of helplessness that emphasized the frightened child, feeling an incredible power in the world around. The surprised adults froze in place, their eyes wide in surprise, as if they couldn't believe their ears, and their looks showed a mixture of shock and curiosity. It was a genes, a human incarnation that bore the traits of a dragon. These amazing creatures and legends say that their mighty wings cut through steel, as if pensively, the aristocrat could not understand how humans Thomas, waving his hand with some displeasure, said that the only way to find out the truth was to carefully check all the facts and evidence. The man's hands carefully touched the empty wall, and he, thinking over his words, said that they should have come here earlier, because this inconspicuous detail. The hand confidently grasped the hilt of the sword, as if feeling the power and responsibility. A fiery strike was launched, meeting the magical defense with great force, creating a bright flash. Thomas was impressed by how much money had been invested into the protection, as there was not a scratch left on the stone, indicating the high quality of the magic spell. Eli, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but make a joke, noting that the swordmaster was. The guy, turning with a sword in his hand, ordered his companion to carefully watch his actions, wanting to prove his strength and power, to show that he was able to blow after blow. Deafening cracks were heard, and soon the shield could not withstand the onslaught. There was also a grate separating the prisoner from the rest of the space, creating the feeling of an invisible wall. Inside, Praman Forez, chained, knelt, his strong figure radiating an aura of power. Despite the man's eyes glowed red like coals in a fire, and the gray in his hair only emphasized his experience and strength. Surprised, the companion asked again what the whole wing and the spiritual leader, which the dragon was called. The swordmaster briefly explained that the existence of such a being was of utmost importance to the other genes, as it could be the key to understanding their true. The ability to reincarnate and retain memories was only active for those beings who had intact. The winged man was joined by another, also with wings. Sometimes, Eli, looking at what was happening in surprise, asked what had happened between the city and the airbending creature. Coldly, with a hint of irony, Thomas said that, apparently, the lady really had. Suddenly, one of the winged men spoke up, saying that he would not tell who he served. With his red eyes flashing, the man shouted loudly that he would be reborn again and make ordinary people suffer, burn in hell. The swordmaster could not allow this to happen, and so he was determined to end the evil dragon by standing next to the bars. He added that the winged creatures were good at destroying themselves, and their deaths could. This enraged the dragon, and in a fit of rage, he cursed that Thomas would avenge. Coldly, with a mocking tone in his voice, the knight asked how boldly a representative of a race hated by the gods could speak so shamelessly. If only the lady had gotten involved with the dragon, he would quickly pay for his. The man made a request and a prayer to the goddess of plants, begging her to shrink down upon them and stand by their side, to grant them strength and protect. The man's eyes were wild with despair, and he screamed the goddess's name loudly. Eli herself stood frozen in shock, unsure of how to react. Her mouth was wide open in surprise, and her eyes widened. With a smile on his lips, the man continued, that even the gods feared the mistress of plants, and that was why they locked her up. If the dragons, Thomas asked again the name of the one who controlled the plants, causing the girl next to him to start to get nervous. The dragon mockingly declared that if he even tried to touch them, the goddess would curse him, confidently emphasizing his power. Eli herself stood nearby and did not listen to the nonsense that the old man was indignant. Jupiter had spoken the same words in the past as his predecessors, and his white hair was a sign of special nobility, and together with other gods, Jupiter participated in an important decision about. Eli herself sat locked in her room, her knees pressed to her chest, immersed in the sadness and loneliness that enveloped her like a dark veil. The girl with long hair at that moment perceived these rumors as nonsense, because being a prisoner, the girl's body began to shake with anger, and, gathering all, the goddess grabbed the bars of the grate with her hands, full of rage and despair. Eli screamed loudly, claiming that the mistress of plants could not destroy the entire world, while her abilities, the clan leader was not going to reveal all his secrets so easily. His chained hands reached forward, revealing sharp, claw-like nails, as if he was trying to grab something The man began to complain loudly that he himself was disgusted by praying to some goddess, feeling how pride and after this, the dragon grabbed the beauty's neck with his hand, rejoicing that Eli herself had. The girl, finding herself in a difficult situation, felt how the air gradually began. The winged one, with despair in his voice, screamed that if the swordmaster really cared about this girl, Thomas gripped the sword tightly with both hands, and with a rage delivered a fiery blow, commanding immediately a clawed hand, like a harbinger of misfortune. The frightened lady fell at the feet of the commander, who, standing next to the weapon, sternly asked the lady not to interfere. The blows fell one after another, like rain. Soon the man fell to the ground with a limp body, and surprise was reflected on his face. Eli rushed to her companion, anxiously asking why he had killed another man so coldly. Now she could not contain her excitement, and was ready to interrogate him in order to understand his actions. The man turned his head to the side, trying to avoid his interlocutor's questions about. The guy briefly noted that Eli, with her stubborn and independent nature, would never agree to unite with the dragon. Moving forward, the knight began to explain that the goddess was one of the 8 deities who were responsible for the prosperity and protection of their country, playing an important role in its fate. As he dealt powerful blows to the dragon's wings, Thomas became increasingly convinced that this noble lady would never betray her subjects, remaining faithful and devoted to her people, even in the most difficult times. When asked if her neck was okay, the girl confidently replied with a smile that everything was fine and that no problems had arisen, adding that she felt great and was ready to continue her business. Taking off her mask, the girl smiled and said with confidence that only extras died from such wounds, while she was the real main character of her own epic story, not going to give up. After this, the aristocrat grabbed her head in horror, unable to imagine what she would have to tell her parents when she returned home with these terrible bruises on her neck, which would certainly cause them anxiety and questions. Almost crying, she was afraid to show her family that she felt anger that was much more terrible than what the winged creatures could cause, because her internal experiences were much more severe than external threats. The man smiled as he thought about how stunning his companion was, when suddenly a voice came through his earpiece, persistently calling him, "Your Majesty!" interrupting his pleasant thoughts and forcing him to focus on his duties again. Thomas briefly replied that he was on the line, and they should go inside to clean up the place, as the condition of the premises required urgent cleaning and attention. After that, the guy explained that there were magical mechanisms inside that should be handled with care, as they could be dangerous. At that time, Eli quietly touched her companion with her finger, trying to attract attention. She quietly whispered for his friends to break the bastard's legs when they found him, feeling disgusted at what had happened and wanting revenge for all the torment he had gone through. Thomas couldn't help but laugh and began to shake with laughter at the aristocrat's words, which sounded so unexpected and funny in this situation, making him forget about the tension around him. The lady herself could not calm her rage, tightly clenching her fist and wanting to deal with the scoundrel who had brought her to such a state, destroying in herself the desire to take revenge for all the grievances she had suffered. Suddenly, Thomas stopped and told her that the noblewoman's maid had a knight named Charles assigned to her, who always followed her, providing protection and support, no matter what the obstacles. The maiden's face froze in horror and fear, and the tense smile disappeared from her lips when she learned that her brother's carriage had also followed her, which added alarm to the situation and caused concern that he might be involved in this unpleasant story. A loud scream echoed throughout the village, causing people to freeze in place and look at each other with alarm, realizing that something terrible had happened and their peace had been disturbed. The servants were glad to see their mistress, even with the tears streaming down her face, because it meant she was still alive and safe, and they could support her in her time of need. Chloe, trying to overcome her own emotions, fought the desire to hug her owner, realizing how important it was to support her in this difficult moment and show that she was there. She quickly began to write to the lady in the carriage, trying to express all her feelings and experiences, persistently convincing her that it was necessary to return home as soon as possible, where they could find comfort and safety in familiar walls, far from all worries. But before leaving, the beauty turned to the swordmaster, who had pulled his hood over his head and was standing nearby, quietly watching what was happening and, it seemed, ready to come to the rescue at any moment. Pointing her finger forward, Eli reminded him of the bastard boy's legs that needed to be broken, giving her voice confidence and determination, full of a desire for justice for everything that had happened. She then held up 2 fingers, meaning that it was both legs that needed to be broken, not just one, emphasizing her determination and seriousness in punishing the scoundrel. Thomas couldn't help but start shaking with laughter again, unable to suppress his joy at the playful words of his interlocutor and the absurdity of the situation they found themselves in. A happy smile appeared on his face, and his eyes narrowed with pleasure, reflecting the joy and fun that engulfed him at that moment, making his appearance even more attractive and cheerful. The aristocrat nevertheless got into the transport, and the carriage set off, while the horses located in front began to move forward, carrying her into the unknown, far from worries and anxieties. The assistant behind him addressed the prince in an anxious tone, informing him that they had not been able to find Forrest to unravel his cunning plans and designs, which, apparently, could threaten the peace and well-being of their kingdom. The man's friend was deeply surprised that they had managed to find a trace of the very one they had been looking for so long, because it seemed that this man had simply disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only a mystery and many questions. As proof, Thomas threw something dark into his friend's hands, confidently saying that he had caught exactly what they were looking for, and now they had the key to solving all the mysteries surrounding their pursuit. It was the head of the winged creature that had previously threatened them, and its terrifying appearance confirmed that they had indeed encountered a dangerous enemy that was now rendered harmless by their efforts and courage. The knight stood frozen in fear, looking at the thing in his hands, unable to utter a word as horror and shock overwhelmed him, and he could not believe that he was actually holding the head of the monster that had once threatened them all. Thomas calmly said that this was only their first step, and there were many more creatures that needed to be caught, anticipating new adventures and opportunities that awaited them ahead in this dangerous game. And only after this will peace finally come to the empire. Doves will fly over the houses of peaceful residents, symbolizing a new time and hope for a better future, free from fear and hatred. Lady Derman herself has changed greatly after losing her memory. Previously, she only smiled silently at everyone, but now, faced with new circumstances, she has become more open and determined, ready to explore the world around her and restore lost connections. And now she showed her emotions so sincerely that she could not restrain herself and rushed into a fight, freeing herself from her previous restraint and showing everyone that she was no longer going to hide her feelings under a mask of politeness and calmness. The man couldn't wait for the next meeting with the lady who was able to truly interest him, causing a storm of emotions and hopes in his heart that something special could arise between them. The knights standing nearby could not understand why their master was smiling so strangely while discussing someone behind his back, and they were overcome with curiosity, fueled by uncertainty about their leader's intentions. When Thomas expressed his desire to return home as soon as possible, they bowed respectfully before him, expressing their respect and willingness to fulfill his request. Understanding how important this moment was for him, they called the man who dressed in the fur robe of the crown prince of the Fuente Empire a chorus rendolan, expressing both admiration and surprise, because his new appearance seemed to give him a special charisma and grandeur. At this time, Iona, the goddess of wine, was shouting loudly at Jupiter, who could not even follow the escaped mistress of plants, and her angry words were carried throughout the heavenly palace, creating an atmosphere of tension and discontent. The handsome god with white hair sat down on the sofa opposite her and asked her a favor, his voice sounding confident, but at the same time with a hint of tenderness, causing mixed feelings and interest in her heart. He ordered his interlocutor to call all the gods to a meeting to discuss this important topic about the fugitive. His voice sounded authoritative, emphasizing the significance of what was happening and the need for joint action in this situation. The gods soon all gathered in one room, and one of them, a muscular man, spoke in bewilderment. Did Jupiter finally change his mind about the goddess who reminded him of trash, causing the other gods to exchange glances? The water god, Angie, with blue hair and eyes, covered his face with his hand, saying that they could still catch the escaped lady, expressing his hope that the situation was not hopeless and they still had a chance to restore justice. Sina, the goddess of the earth, arrogantly stated that the gods also have limitations in the lands of humans, and the lady will not be able to go far, emphasizing that even divine beings must abide by certain rules and boundaries set for everyone. Another girl spoke up and urged her brothers to treat the plant mistress with respect, calling her by her name and not trash, thus protecting the dignity of the runaway and reminding everyone of the importance of treating everyone well. It was the goddess of justice Tisea who defended the rights of her friend and condemned the gods for being willing to renounce their spirituality, emphasizing the importance of honesty and respect for everyone, regardless of the circumstances. The muscular man and the goddess of wine had a different opinion. They only laughed at her, demonstrating their disdain for her words and underestimation of the importance of justice, which caused discontent and indignation among the other gods. With a wave of her hand, the pink-haired lady stated that the goddess of justice was the only one who remained on the side of the one who controlled nature, emphasizing the importance of support and unity among the gods in these difficult times. Reaching her hand forward, she addressed her, saying that they had already broken the laws by sealing the dragons and urged caution, emphasizing that their actions could have serious consequences for all gods and creatures. After the crystal beings disappeared, the people in their country stopped hearing the voices of the gods, and this caused a feeling of abandonment and loneliness among them, as if the connection with the higher powers had been lost forever, and even the oracles could not accurately predict their words. The number of believers decreased, and their faith became weaker and weaker, which threatened both the people themselves and their connection with the gods, and led to general despondency and fear for the future. Polgor, the god of lightning, shouted loudly that they must get rid of the culprit as quickly as possible while they still had strength, emphasizing the urgency of the situation and the need for action to restore the lost balance. Titia stubbornly did not understand what was the fault of her friend, who had been in captivity for 200 years, and her inflexibility only increased the tension in their discussion, calling into question the justice of all the events that were taking place. An argument broke out between the two gods. They stood next to each other, looking at each other with menace in their eyes, ready to defend their positions and argue about who was right in this difficult situation, not wanting to give in one step. The conflict was interrupted by the voice of the supreme god, who explained with authority that Eli would remain where she was, emphasizing that the decision had been made and further arguments would be useless, since the higher powers had already taken their position. They had a more important problem. They could not understand why the world tree was withering, and this caused concern among the gods, since the health of the tree was linked to the balance of all nature, and its withering threatened the world they sought to protect. Angie and Satina expressed their deep concern that without the plant goddess, the world tree could completely wither and disappear, which would have catastrophic consequences for the entire world, depriving it of vitality and harmony. Jupiter, his head down in silence, understood the anxiety of his brothers and sisters, realizing that their concerns about the state of the world tree reflected deeper issues that required immediate intervention and resolution. Suddenly, Polgor raised his voice and loudly declared that he would not sit idly by while Jupiter remained idle, urging the other gods to take action and expressing his dissatisfaction with the fact that no steps were being taken to address the problem of the withering world tree. The Lightning Master was willing to do everything himself because, as he put it, no one wanted to take responsibility for the actions that were necessary to save the world tree and restore order to their world. The supreme god, unable to restrain his fellow tribesmen, gave them permission to deal with the situation on their own and act as they saw fit, hoping that each of them would show initiative and responsibility. With a smile, the muscular man vowed that he would soon find the mistress of plants, determined to bring her back and restore balance to the world, despite all the obstacles that might arise along the way. At this time, Eli was lying on the couch, happy that the storm had finally died down, and next to her, her pet was squeaking, encouraging her with his melodic sound and creating an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility in this long-awaited moment of rest. The maid, who was walking towards her mistress, asked her who she was talking to while sitting alone, for the room was filled with a quiet but tense atmosphere that made one worry about what might happen. Trying to hide her plant helper under the pillow, the girl asked where exactly Chloe came from, because such an appearance seemed to her quite unexpected and intriguing. With her hand over her heart, Eli admitted that she expected corporal punishment or isolation for several years from her family after her misdeed, fearing the consequences of her actions and hoping for understanding. But instead, she received warmth and care, because even the servants, forgetting about their duties, left all their work, showing attention to their mistress and offering her help and support during this difficult time. Chloe smiled and explained that the thing was that the entire royal retinue truly loved their mistress, because she always showed kindness and care to each of them, and now they were ready to do everything possible to support her in difficult times. Embarrassed, the unusual beauty turned, looking thoughtfully at her maid. Her long blue hair fluttered, giving her a special charm, and her kind eyes shone with warmth and understanding. The lady, the pride of her family, dreamed that her parents would see in her not just a continuation of a glorious dynasty, but an individual with her own aspirations and dreams that deserved recognition. Also in high society, all the nobles could not resist her charm and impeccable talent, which attracted attention and admiration, making them crave friendship and affection, and her refined manners made her the center of attraction. And yet, it was strange and shocking that such a noble maiden, possessing all the qualities that could make her happy, decided to turn to a bottle of poison and leave this world, leaving behind many questions and bewilderment. Tired, Eli leaned back on the bed, wanting to rest a little and fall into a sweet sleep after a long and tiring journey that left a trace of fatigue and melancholy on her soul. The family of the former mistress of this body truly loved her, hugging and supporting her during difficult times, trying to give her the feeling of warmth and care that is so necessary to restore mental balance. While the locked-up Eli could only dream of receiving even a drop of such affection, sitting in her prison, she felt how melancholy and loneliness gradually engulfed her soul, depriving her of hope for the best. Therefore, Rosalita could not worry about the goddess burdening her life with any unpleasant test, but, on the contrary, generously bestow inspiration and sincere gratitude for every moment, filling her heart with light and joy. The maid couldn't help but cover her face with her hand when she saw how sweet and charming the noble lady was, glowing with tenderness and kindness, like the morning dawn itself. She instantly fell into a sweet and serene sleep as soon as her head softly touched the cozy pillow, and her heavy eyelids closed, allowing her to slip away into a magical world of dreams and peace, where there were no worries or anxieties. The next day, the sun's rays brightly illuminated the earth, creating beautiful weather, and the gentle warmth awakened the plants, causing them to grow and develop with every moment, filling the air with freshness and vital energy. Eli threw the doors open loudly, determined to find out the truth that had been so carefully hidden from her. With her appearance, a deafening sound was heard in the corridor, frightening the maids, who exchanged anxious glances. With a blush on her cheeks, the beauty confidently declared that she had listened to the message and was ready to reveal all the secrets that this mysterious object hid. There was determination in her voice, and her eyes sparkled with impatience. Chloe immediately hid the box behind her back, trying to feign complete ignorance and bewilderment when the owner began talking about her. Her heart began to beat faster, and she adopted a mask of indifference, hoping that this trick would work. However, Eli turned out to be much more perceptive than Chloe expected, and, quickly snatching the gift from the maid's hands, she was already opening the lid with a confident movement, filling the air with tension and foreshadowing the revelation of all the secrets. Awkwardly reaching for her happiness, she felt slightly confused and a little sad, not knowing how to cope with the situation that had arisen, which seemed to her both joyful and confusing at the same time. The box contained a black frilly lingerie set that seemed completely out of place and even vulgar, leaving her with mixed feelings and surprise, as it looked like it was meant for someone other than her humble life. Puzzled and with a questioning look, frowning, the beauty asked what this could mean, carefully putting the thing back into the box, as if hoping that the answer would be found on its own. Also inside was a letter written by Philip, the sender of this nightwear, in which he seemed to share his thoughts and feelings, adding even more mystery to this strange surprise. The man wrote to her that he dreamed of seeing his beloved in this outfit, and so he decided to send it, hoping that it would bring them both pleasure and add spice to their relationship. He would have liked to see her in person wearing this gift, but he couldn't because of the misunderstanding and deep frustration that had arisen between them, which only increased the longing and desire to restore the lost connection that he had thought about so much in recent days. Also, in the letter she was holding in her hands, it was written that the sender did not want to see any more provocations and urged the girl not to meet other guys, emphasizing that this was very important. With horror on her face, Eli couldn't believe that this text was meant for her, and her fragile heart squeezed with anxiety when she realized how deeply everything had changed between them, leaving her in confusion and bewilderment. With her brown eyes glaring angrily and sparkling with anger, she asked the maid who this scoundrel Philip was and what he wanted from her, her voice trembling with tension and incomprehension. The lady was looking for an answer to a riddle that was becoming more and more confusing. Chloe spoke first, revealing the terrible truth about their mistress's past that she knew about, her voice shaking with emotion as she shared secrets that could change everything Eli believed to be true. Philip was a talented artist supported by the Marquis family, and his career flourished thanks to their influence and resources. But behind the outward brilliance lay a complex history of ambition and disappointment. Eli had previously admired one of the works of this cultured man, and it was this work that became the reason for their first meeting, which she remembered for the rest of her life. Together, they spent time walking along the picturesque streets and discussing the paintings, sharing their thoughts on the colors, shapes, and meanings contained in each work of art. Conversations became more than just an exchange of opinions for them, and everything was going well until that incident occurred when he put the painting of the Marquise's naked daughter on public display in the courtyard, shocking everyone present and disrupting the usual order. The shocked lady, standing embarrassed and ashamed, opened her mouth in deep surprise, unable to believe her eyes when she saw something completely incredible happening in front of her. It was a painting by the same artist who left his signature at the bottom and wrote a passionate confession to his beloved, capturing on canvas not only the unusual beauty, but also the depth of his feelings. Eli, full of anger and hostility, felt hostility boiling inside her when the lady confirmed that it was Philip who painted her from life, capturing her appearance on canvas, and this caused a storm of emotions in her. The glass world of the goddess was shattered into pieces, and she could not understand why the artist was so anxious to disgrace his beloved, leaving her in such a humiliating light that every piece of broken glass was a reminder of pain and betrayal. The woman's hand clutched the letter tightly, as if trying to hold in her fingers all the feelings and emotions it evoked, and it seemed that at that moment she was ready to reflect all her pain and hopes on this sheet of paper. The aristocrat asked her maid where the bastard artist, who had so rudely insulted the girl, was at that moment, and in what prison he would have to serve his sentence for his shameful act, since his actions required serious retribution. Surprised by the escape of her former friend, the lady asked how he could leave her so easily when he had previously written her such touching letters, full of feelings and promises. Every word was written with deep respect and sincere love. A shocked Eli realized that her father had known all along that Philip had been sending her these letters, but had taken no action to stop it, a revelation that left her deeply shaken, causing a wave of anger and betrayal. Chloe denied this, claiming that her mistress had previously ordered her not to talk about it and to hide the very first letter, so that no one would know about the contents and raise unnecessary questions that could cause unnecessary problems. The Marquis was furious to learn that the scoundrel artist had dared to send such frank letters to his dear daughter, and his enormous anger grew with every second, like a storm ready to break out at any second. Having brought the servants before him, he began to scold them with bitterness and contempt, reproaching them for failing to prevent such a disgrace for his family, and for allowing an immoral artist to penetrate their lives as if it were an ordinary thing. The noblewoman asked her father not to be angry, explaining that her subordinates were simply following her orders, as if blindly following the instructions of their mistress, and could not realize that their actions could lead to such unpleasant consequences. The aristocrat clutched his head and did not understand why his daughter had hidden everything up until this moment, and was also afraid to admit her feelings and actions, which had now turned into a real scandal and led to his anger. Eli herself didn't understand what was going on either, but she knew that Rosalita must have her own reasons for this behavior, even if it was difficult for her to explain it to herself. Her friend always remained a mystery, hiding her intentions behind beautiful words. With her hands folded in front of her, the noblewoman modestly replied that she simply did not want to worry her father, hoping that in this way she could avoid unnecessary problems and maintain peace in the family, even if it meant hiding her true feelings. The man angrily exclaimed his daughter's name, his voice filled with anger, and, unable to restrain himself, he headed towards her, determined to deal with her and find out why she had kept silent for so long about what was happening in their house. But instead of reproaches or corporal punishment, he tenderly hugged his baby, feeling his heart fill with love and protective instincts, because at that moment it was more important for him to support her than to punish her for mistakes. The nobleman heard about what had happened in the city and asked his daughter not to pretend about anything, realizing that the truth may be bitter, but it must be spoken so that they could cope with the consequences together and restore the lost peace. No one else in the entire country would dare to say a bad word about her, because everyone knew that family is the stronghold of honor and dignity, and now that the lady was protected, insults and gossip no longer had the right to exist. All red with embarrassment, the lady listened attentively to the words of her parent, feeling her heart tremble with pride and excitement, because she understood that every word was not only protection, but also an expression of unconditional love and support in a difficult moment for her. After which she vowed to her father that she would never again turn a deaf ear to anything, and looked resolutely in his direction, determined to correct her mistakes and no longer hide the truth that could affect their family. Eli knew that the former Rosalita had already suffered a lot from others, and therefore now she had to stand up for her, protecting her friend from injustice and insult, because friendship is not only joy, but also a willingness to support at all times. The wind gently swayed the leaves, making them whisper their secrets, as if reminding us that every movement of nature is filled with life and magic, and the autumn trees sparkled gold in the sunlight. The lady with blue hair sat with a spoon raised in her hand, as if preparing for a taste feast. The unusual color of her hair reflected a bright personality and attracted attention, and in her eyes there was a sparkle of interest in what would happen next. After which she asked her interlocutor to repeat what he had said. He politely agreed, declaring that he was ready to help in finding the scoundrel artist who had dared to defame her name and disturb the peace of her life. The guy sheepishly asked if he should have openly called that man his sister's fiancé, realizing that this question could cause mixed reactions and become a source of new troubles in their relationship. Eli could not utter a word, realizing that she could have had a lover here who had suddenly disappeared from her memory, and this discovery caused her anxiety and confusion. Her heart strove to remind her of forgotten feelings. All red and embarrassed, the girl began to boast about how her brother had inspired her, trying to show how much she had achieved thanks to his support and advice, and her voice was filled with pride, despite her inner turmoil. Benjamin expressed his concern that he was overloading his sister with information, sometimes about the artist, sometimes about the fiancé, realizing that each new piece of news could cause her stress and anxiety, and did not want to impose unnecessary problems on her. However, the lady, leaning closer, asked with slight excitement whether her dear lover had a white horse, about which there were legends, giving the whole conversation a special charm and intrigue. The maiden, lost in her dreams, sang with a smile that such a romantic man as he was bound to have a white horse and a beautiful rose, symbolizing love and tenderness. Taking a cup of hot tea in her hand, she thought with curiosity about who her future husband would be, and felt a desire to learn about his fate and character, because this was a question that did not give her peace. However, the noblewoman immediately spat out all the liquid, having difficulty realizing that she was about to marry the crown prince, and this news shook her to the depths of her soul, causing a storm of emotions from surprise and excitement. Mustard helped the hostess clean up the remains of the tea while she tried to come to her senses after such unexpected news that shocked her and filled her with dizzying thoughts about the future. The brother, deeply worried, sat nearby, not knowing how to help his sister cope with the worries and confusion after receiving the news, feeling helpless in the face of great experiences. Eli, smiling, waved her hand at her relative, as if hinting that there was nothing to worry about, because she knew perfectly well that the suitors could always be changed later if such a need arose. She desperately wanted to experience that all-consuming passionate feeling between lovers who were ready to do anything for each other, challenging fate and any obstacles in their path. Just like the main characters from her favorite novels, who, despite all the difficulties, obstacles, and adversity, always found the strength to go to the end and achieve a happy ending, following their dreams and faith in true love. Concerned, Benjamin asked his sister, with a soft note of concern in his voice, if he had pushed her too hard, fearing that his actions might have caused her unnecessary stress or embarrassment at this difficult moment. The girl happily reported that after losing her memory, she did not remember her future husband, and that is why she became so interested in finding out what he was really like, because for her, it became a new and exciting secret. However, there was one thing that was bothering the boy, and despite all his efforts to hide his uneasiness, he silently turned away, hoping that no one would notice his inner turmoil and growing uncertainty. The aristocrat gracefully stabbed a piece of dessert with a fork and, handing it to her brother, gently asked him not to worry about what had happened to the painting, adding that he should act more confidently because such trifles were not worth worrying about. The handsome man laughed and sincerely thanked the girl for her support, because before they kept the girl at home, since she could not protect herself, and now his attention and care were important for her in difficult moments. The noblewoman sat opposite and smiled, full of hope and expectation, right up until the moment when she learned that she was destined to learn noble etiquette in just a month or two, and this news suddenly darkened for her, causing slight anxiety and doubts about her abilities. Jumping up from her seat, the beauty asked in bewilderment why she needed to study this complicated and seemingly unnecessary noble etiquette, feeling emotions and a desire to understand what it was all for boiling inside her. The man's hand extended a book, carefully holding it at her eye level, as if offering a chance to immerse herself in new knowledge and secrets that could help her on this difficult path. The boy explained that it was the book of fairy tales that his sister had mentioned earlier, and which had always inspired her, immersing her in a world of magic and adventure, which perhaps would help her find joy in learning too. Turning away, Eli muttered that this book was recommended to her by one person, which surprised her relative, because he did not expect that her interests could intersect with such unusual sources of inspiration. This man turned out to be the same familiar man in the cloak from the dungeon, who mysteriously appeared in the life of the beauty and left a deep mark, awakening in her curiosity and a desire to learn more about the mysterious past. The noblewoman, apologizing, asked her brother to give her a little time so that she could begin reading the stories right then and there, as she was overcome with impatience and a desire to immerse herself in the magical world of fairy tales about which she had heard so much. Inside was written a story about a black dragon that promised to capture the imagination and transport you to a world of exciting adventures full of mystery and magic. At the origins of the world lived dragons, people, and gods, who, intertwining their destinies, created amazing legends and myths, leaving behind a legacy full of magic, power, and mysteries, which later became the basis for many stories. The deities treated ordinary people as if they were their own children, generously bestowing upon them care and wisdom, while the crystalline creatures, watching this from the sidelines, envied them, wondering why they did not receive such a privilege and warmth. And so the dragons, full of ambition and desire, decided to take human souls in order to become like people, striving to know their feelings, emotions, and perhaps to find that very warmth that had remained unattainable for them for so long. But because the crystal beings began to attack their younger brothers, people, overcome with fear and despair, began to pray to the gods for their protection, hoping for their intervention and mercy in this difficult period for them. The gods, realizing the seriousness of the situation and the threat posed by the dragons, decided to intervene, and after a long and fierce battle, sealed the dragon in a sacred tree, hoping that this would stop its destructive influence and restore peace among the people. With a tired sigh, the lady asked her brother if anything was known about the goddess of plants, as she was interested in how this powerful figure could influence the events in their world and protect it from the impending threat. Standing up from his seat and pushing back his chair, the man said that this goddess was evil for many reasons, including envy of humans and dragons, as well as old grudges that continued to influence others' actions and attitudes towards the world around them. With his arms folded across his chest and his gaze averted, Benjamin reminded her that this maiden was the patroness of the Gains, who prayed to her sincerely, hoping for the blessing and protection of the deity, despite her sinister reputation and past actions. Moreover, he added that it was by the will of the evil mistress that the world tree was destroyed, and this event exacerbated the conflict between all beings, leaving behind destructive consequences that are still felt in their world. The girl stubbornly declared that Eli was innocent, and turning away, added that, on the contrary, the goddess should have protected the country in which she was born, and not brought destruction and suffering to her children, which caused her deep bewilderment and anger. The man, smiling, agreed that his sister's words did indeed make sense and logic, and that her sincere perception of the situation made one think about how difficult it was sometimes to understand the true intentions of the deities. After which, Benjamin suggested going for a walk in the fresh air and getting out of the four walls of the mansion, hoping that a change of scenery would help them both to escape from heavy thoughts and enjoy the beauty of nature, which gave them peace. Eli cast a red glance at her brother and asked where he wanted to go, curious about his plans, and hoping that it would be something interesting and exciting that would distract them from their anxious thoughts. The name of Solean Academy was spoken, which was famous for its large and beautiful architecture, admiring everyone with its grandeur and harmony, which attracted the attention of both students and visitors from all over the world. The man in glasses turned around in surprise, noticing that new visitors had come to see him, and his face lit up with interest, because he was always curious to know who exactly would decide to enter this world and what surprises they could bring. It was an institution that controlled the life of the two academies, and where people destined to work for the good of the empire in the future were educated, forming their knowledge and skills necessary to serve the highest goals of society. Among the subjects studied, there were magical technologies, opening the doors to a world of unusual possibilities and innovations for students, combining ancient knowledge with modern approaches to science and art. The students screamed loudly as they ran around the table where they had accidentally started a fire during the experiment, filling the room with panic and chaos as the fire quickly spread, and everyone needed to act quickly to prevent serious consequences. Eli froze in place with her brother, asking if it was the same magicians who had been so capricious before, because their careless experiments could have led to the most unexpected and dangerous consequences that they could only guess about. Suddenly, Dean Kanea intervened, greeting the young aristocrats with a courteous bow. Her confident presence inspired calm in the chaos, and her experience and wisdom promised to quickly resolve the situation and restore order. She heard that the young lady had lost her memory, so she reminded her that they could communicate less formally, simply by their first names, to create a friendlier atmosphere and help the girl feel more comfortable. The mages were still learning the basics of throwing water to put out fires, and it took them time to become good mages, able to control their powers and use them wisely without causing unpredictable consequences. With a smile, the lady said that the benefits would become more accessible to the entire civilization if magical progress steadily grew, opening new horizons for everyone and allowing people to use magic for the benefit of society. Eli couldn't help but agree that the young mages were something to be very proud of, as their desire for knowledge and willingness to take risks for the sake of experiments demonstrated amazing courage and a desire to change the world. But the country was left without magic when the dragon was sealed under the world tree, which significantly weakened the influence of magic on the daily lives of people and made them dependent on rare magical sources. The goddess was glad that the people were able to find another way to use their magic despite the loss of the dragon, and her heart filled with hope as she saw how they adapted to the new conditions, developing unique methods. This was why she loved her country. The wizards argued but did not give up, remaining ready for new challenges, confident that their persistence and pursuit of knowledge would eventually bear fruit. Politely, Kanea offered to lead the guests to the room where the teacher was already waiting for them, confidently leading them through the corridors of the academy and creating an atmosphere of warmth and friendliness to help the young aristocrats feel more comfortable. Surprised, Ely asked for what reason exactly their mentor was waiting for them. Her curiosity was growing with each passing moment, because she could not imagine what could have happened so important that their teacher would be ready to meet them in such a hurry. The man with glasses, looking at the goddess in shock, asked who could upset the young lady, since she was sitting opposite him with her head down. His heart sank with worry, because it was important for him to know what was bothering the innocent soul. He could have told her tales of dragons, but the lady had already read a book of fairy tales, immersing herself in a world of magic and adventure, and the stories seemed familiar to her, like good old memories, awakening interest and tender feelings. The full story was sacred and of national security, and therefore guarded by the family and the temple. He suggested that the visitor contact the temple, where there was more information, confident that they would be able to tell her about the dragon. The lady jumped up from her seat and asked the mentor if he knew why she had lost her memory, and why everyone believed that Ely was connected to dragons, her eyes shining with curiosity and persistence. Bowing his head, the man noticed that his interlocutor was carefully reading a book. Her expression was concentrated, and he realized that she had long been immersed in studying stories that could give her the key to solving her own secrets. Originally, there were two types of dragons, black and red, the latter of which perished during the war, leaving behind only legends and memories of the power of these majestic creatures that once flew through the skies. After which, the black dragon's resentment fell on the shoulders of the winged people, turning into a heavy burden that they had to bear, since now they became the keepers of secrets and protectors of those who still remembered the former greatness of their ancestors. The lady asked him if he knew anything about the young Gein's words, which sounded like a prophecy from a former high priest, his voice trembling with excitement, for these words might contain important clues that could shed light on her memory loss. The mentor confirmed that there were rumors that Ely, the goddess, was going to form an alliance with the dragons, which caused a wave of discussions and disputes among the mages and aristocrats, because it could change the balance of power in their world. The aristocrat froze when she learned about the priest with gray wings, and her heart sank in surprise, because this man was connected with many ancient secrets and legends that she had heard in her childhood. Concerned, Benjamin noticed that his sister looked bad. The woman's face was pale and her eyes were full of anxiety, which made him want to immediately find out what was tormenting her so much and do everything possible to support and calm her down. However, the goddess merely waved it off, asking the teacher if such information could be trusted. Her voice sounded with a note of skepticism, for she knew how easily rumors could be distorted, and it was important to her to receive truthful answers in this complicated matter. The man insisted that he had told the truth to all who sought him, and so the lady could go to the temple if she doubted his words, confident that there the maiden would be able to find confirmation and perhaps even unravel the secrets that lay behind the loss of memory. Suddenly, Ely jumped up from her seat, sincerely apologizing to the mentors, and expressed her desire to talk to her brother to share with him her experiences and thoughts about recent events. The sun shone brightly, generously illuminating the academy, as if trying to emphasize its majestic architecture and the feeling of warmth and comfort that filled the space. Ely walked slowly along the winding road, despite all the obstacles that she encountered along the way, immersed in her deep thoughts about what lay ahead and how her life would change after today's important conversation. She was terribly shocked when she learned that Gens turned out to be a priest of the Grey Wings, and, unable to resist, she punched the air, as if trying to dispel her fears and uncertainty in this unexpected discovery. She had heard stories about them many times before, and each time these stories left a deeper imprint on her mind, arousing curiosity and slight anxiety every time the conversation turned to such events again. These people considered themselves truly chosen, proudly clutching weapons in their hands, and sincerely believing that the bones protruding from their backs were indisputable proof of their superior lineage or special species. Such people were often referred to as fallen dragons, creatures that had once possessed greatness but had now lost their former glory, leaving only memories of ancient strength and arrogance. Gritting her teeth, Eli firmly believed that they were all fakes, imposters who only pretended to be great, but in fact had neither the true strength nor the dignity that they boasted about. How could the gods believe in this myth created by humans themselves? This question haunted her, for it was difficult to imagine that higher beings could succumb to an illusion created by mortals and accept it as truth. With fury in her eyes, the lady walked past the old tree, deeply convinced that she had become a symbol of her own fall, as if every step was a reflection of her own mistakes and missed opportunities. Suddenly, the leaves rustled unexpectedly, as if something lurking among the branches had come to life, and at that moment the girl screamed in fright, jumping back, overcome by an unexpected feeling of anxiety. The stranger deftly caught the beauty, saving her from a falling tree, smilingly saying that she got into trouble so easily. Eli stared at her savior in surprise, not believing that at that moment fate had sent her such a protector. There, underneath her, lying on the ground, was Thomas, his face expressionless, dressed in elegant and beautiful clothes, as if his stylish appearance did not match the current situation he found himself in. The girl, quickly and carefully getting up from the guy, not wanting to cause him any inconvenience, suddenly exclaimed his name, full of anxiety and concern, hoping that he was okay and would be able to get up, despite everything that had happened. The teacher and several other people approached the source of the noise, trying to make sure that everything was okay and that no one was hurt in the incident, causing a disturbance with their appearance. Suddenly, the pair were interrupted by a loud voice that desperately shouted the crown prince's name, causing everyone to turn towards him, as if this call could change the course of events and draw attention to their plight. Surprised, the boy and the girl simultaneously turned towards the noise, their faces expressing confusion and curiosity, because they were interested in finding out what happened and who could have caused such a reaction. In shock and horror, Eli realized that the man lying beneath her was the future emperor. Her heart began to beat faster with anxiety, because the noblewoman could not believe that she was in such a situation with such an important person. Grabbing her companion by the shirt, she demanded the truth from him. Was the guy really a king? Or was it all just a game played out by him in some strange joke that could have serious consequences for her? The worried brother and his mentor rushed to meet the aristocrat, trying to find out what had happened and how they could help, because the anxiety on the woman's face caused them serious concern for her well-being. Standing next to his petrified sister, Benjamin sheepishly apologized to the crown prince for the inconvenience he had caused, his voice trembling with excitement and fear of the possible consequences of their absurd situation. Soon the former priest Andrew approached them, confidently saying that all this time he had been waiting for the future emperor, preparing to provide him with his help and support so that everything would turn out in his favor. At this time, the mentor thoughtfully examined the broken tree, wondering how exactly it could have broken, because its sudden fall seemed strange and unusual to him, raising many questions about what actually happened. The two of them discussed whether everything was all right with the prince, to which he responded with an agreeable nod, confirming that his own condition was satisfactory despite what had happened. Eli couldn't contain her shock, and looking at Thomas, asked in surprise why he hadn't said earlier that he was of royal blood, because this information could have changed everything and explained his behavior. Fuente only chuckled into his fist at these words, as if not taking any questions seriously, and continued to watch what was happening with an expression of slight contempt on his beautiful face. All embarrassed and holding her head in her hands, the maiden did not see anything funny in her words, because for her it was a serious discovery, capable of changing everything she knew about her surroundings and about the prince himself. The prince turned away from those present and, with an expression of determination on his face, said that it was time for them to go, as time was of the essence, and it was necessary to sort out the problems that had arisen. The teacher agreed with the master's order and, slightly bowing his head as a sign of respect, followed him, realizing the importance of the upcoming actions and the need to quickly resolve the issues that had arisen. Upon learning that the Marquise's family had left, Fuente, full of anxiety and excitement, with a serious expression on his face, ordered the report to begin, realizing that any delay in this situation could entail undesirable consequences. Fuente, leaning back in his chair, added that recently a lady named Leah had appeared, who, according to rumors, had the amazing ability to hear God, which caused great interest and much controversy among the aristocrats. The pet had been obediently waiting for its owner in the room all this time, his heart filled with joy with every step, and he was sincerely happy to see her again after a long wait, ready to express his devotion and love. Eli herself, clutching her head, walked around the room in circles, nervously telling that Thomas turned out to be the crown prince. Her voice trembled with excitement, and she could not believe that what had happened was real. Deciding to amuse its owner, the little plant jumped right into her face, trying to tame the panic that had arisen and return her smile. The playful behavior was unexpected, and despite the tense atmosphere, annoyed by this action, the noblewoman cried out, if the problems were more important than her concern about what happened. The female voice sounded stern, and the lady tried to bring the situation back under control, expecting a serious answer to her questions. The lady's attention was drawn to the flowers that stood in a vase in her room and were already wilting, losing their former beauty. Their withered petals and faded leaves reminded her that even the brightest moments can fade. She was extremely surprised that the plant that smelled so nice in the morning suddenly rotted. The sudden change alarmed her, and she wondered what could have caused such an unexpected transformation, causing a feeling of alarm in her. Touching the flower with her fingers, the noblewoman decided to read the memories of her pet, hoping that this would help her understand how to preserve what was dear to her and bring back the lost joy in her life. Suddenly, the plant began to glow, filling the room with a soft, mysterious glow, as if revealing some secret or magical power that no one expected to see. And suddenly, a memory appeared, where Rosalita, coughing up blood, stood next to a tall man. His sullen look and serious expression on his face instilled fear, creating an atmosphere of tension and anxiety. The handsome man with blonde curls said that this would not have happened if Rosalita had agreed to become a priestess of the Grey Wings, and his voice sounded with a note of confidence, as if he knew that words could change a woman's fate. The aristocrat asked her beloved fiancé why he poisoned her. Bewilderment and betrayal could be heard in his voice, and the aristocrat could not believe that the man whom the beauty trusted could cause her such pain. Holding a bottle of poison behind his back, Philip said that the girl had seen something she shouldn't have seen. The man's voice sounded threatening, and his eyes shone with cold calculation, hinting that the girl's life now depended on his own decision. With bitter tears rolling down her cheeks, Rosalita, full of despair and pain, gave voice to her feelings in a desperate cry, declaring that this man would soon regret his actions and realize the pain he had caused her. Philip, rising from his seat, confidently said that they came from completely different worlds, in which she had never experienced poverty or grief, and did not know what the real difficulties of life were. Grabbing his former lover by her clothes and pulling her towards him, he asked with a defiant grin why she didn't hurry up and leave this world where there was so little joy and so much suffering. Rosalita, having lost consciousness, fell lifelessly to the floor, finding herself in immeasurable proximity to the guy's feet, as if she had forgotten about everything that was happening around her. Philip looked down at her coldly, with indifference in his eyes, and slowly lowered the cup, letting it fall to the floor, shattering into pieces and leaving behind only fragments reflecting his indifference. A mysterious figure with black wings stood nearby, emitting a dark aura. He ordered her to clean up the mess and remove all traces of the crime so that nothing would give away their dark intentions. The dragon's name was Theo, and he looked with horror at the blue princess, who, overcome with fear, suffered and trembled, as if she could not cope with the pressure of the dark forces hanging over her, expecting an inevitable threat. With his hands clasped to his side and urged on by his master, Theo muttered that the mistress had strictly ordered him not to kill the blue lady, despite all the circumstances that threatened their safety. With his hands on his hips roughly and a tone of contempt in his voice, Philip reminded them that they had discussed this difficult situation before, and they really should have hurried to avoid trouble and left quickly before it all turned into a real disaster. It was decided to send letters and gifts to the princess as if she were still alive and could appreciate their gestures. The dragon, supporting his master, rose into the air, soaring upward into the clouds, leaving behind only a light trace in the blue sky. Rosalita was left unconscious, alone and helpless, in the empty, gloomy room, where the silence hung over her, emphasizing her vulnerability and defenselessness, as if the room itself regretted losing the princess. The aristocrat's fists clenched tightly from the painful memories of the former owner of this body, as images of joy and suffering flared up in her mind again, leaving a deep mark on her fragile soul. Eli, shocked and appalled, learned that Jeans was next to her at the moment of her death, and the plant was dying from the poison, absorbing its toxic substances and slowly losing its life. It finally dawned on her that Rosalita had not left this world of her own free will. She had been brutally murdered, and this terrible truth had left a deep wound in her weak heart, leaving behind only bitterness and a sense of injustice. She whispered to her pet, confident in her thoughts, that Philip had set everything up on purpose to make her doubt herself and her decisions, as if he was trying to manipulate her fate for his own interests. Philip was a priest of the Grey Wings, and it seemed that he was hiding something, carefully hiding his true intentions behind a mask of calm, which only increased the women's suspicions and desire to understand his secrets. Raising her doomed head to the ceiling, Eli grumbled that if the Grey Wings learned of her living existence, they would return to kill the girl, as if this threat hung over her like a sword, ready to fall at any moment. The girl panicked from the realization that now not only gods, but also dragons were hunting her, and this feeling of an inevitable threat filled her heart with fear, as if an ominous shadow was pursuing the beauty at every step. The little plant, the pet, squealed indignantly, hearing its owner say such stupid and bad things, and also trying to remind her that fear and doubt should not overshadow the hope and light that they could find together in this world. The girl felt a bright fire inside her that blossomed into many roads and futures, illuminating her path and filling her heart with courage, a willingness to choose, and confidence that every decision matters. So Eli decided to first find the escaped artist, and her pet, sitting on her shoulder, moved approvingly, both supporting her decision and suggesting that this step could be the beginning of a new, exciting adventure. Suddenly, attention was drawn to a letter lying on the table, its snow-white envelope mysteriously standing out against the background of other objects, thereby wanting to be opened and read. Chloe, crossing her arms over her chest and with a slight smile on her lips, said that on the table lay an exquisite invitation from the Duke to a tea party, which was to take place in his magnificent estate. Hearing the familiar name, the lady raised her head with slight surprise. Her large eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity, and she, trying to hide her excitement, asked the servant again, with slight uncertainty in her voice, about the meaning of this news. This family belonged to a rather prestigious line of aristocrats who for many generations raised noble officers of the empire, famous for their valiant deeds and devotion to serving their homeland. These families had been feuding with each other for many years, plunging their clans into endless conflicts and intrigues. Derman, one of the most notable representatives of his clan, was known as a man of art and culture. Vermino families, who were different from the rest, fought with weapons, swords, and blades, reflecting the long traditions and military prowess of their ancestors. Their conflicts took place not only in verbal battles, but also on the battlefield. The maid explained that previously there had been a fragile peace between their families, based on mutual concessions. However, after the arrival of the new government, amid changes in the political situation, tensions arose between them. The noblewoman looked at the invitation lying before her in bewilderment, not understanding why it was sent and for what purpose she was supposed to receive it. Her thoughts wandered in endless questions regarding the motivation of the sender. Moreover, the letter bore the inscription that it was addressed to a close friend, which only added to the bewilderment. The noblewoman, with bewilderment and slight irritation, wondered why her name was among those invited. Chloe, standing nearby, protested vigorously, expressing her displeasure that this was merely a mockery. Her voice was confident and decisive, emphasizing that she found the invitation offensive and derogatory. The servant, standing in the background of the tense conversation, added that the lady had never had close people, and in the past she preferred solitude, avoiding close ties with others. When she reached the last lines, Eli let out a cry. The woman's voice was sharp and full of emotion, and she clutched the paper tightly in her hands and called for her maid, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise and anger, as if she couldn't believe what she had read. The aristocrat was about to write a reply on behalf of her family of enemies, in which she intended to express that they were obliged to attend the tea party. The lady carefully considered each word to emphasize the importance of observing etiquette. At the bottom of the letter was the signature of the owner, who, as everyone knew where Philip was, and this detail made the aristocrat feel a little uneasy because he was an important figure in their circle. Soon they arrived at the coast of Elba, which delighted them with its beauty, abundance of green plants, and magnificent architecture, harmoniously blending into the surrounding landscape. The people, animatedly chatting and exchanging opinions, headed towards the place where the tea party was to take place by the water's edge, discussing that, according to the latest rumors, the Vermino family, famous for its reputation, should already be there. With a smile on her lips, Eli said that she had come to this place for a reason, as if she had a premonition that it was here that amazing events and unexpected encounters awaited her. Chloe trailed wearily behind her mistress, the woman's face reflecting an exhausted expression, and she did not have enough energy to hold a conversation or participate in the upcoming events, which gave away her inner state. Raising her head to the heavens, the lady thought about her main goal: to find the missing artist, ready to make any sacrifices to achieve this intention, regardless of the consequences. The butler, bowing respectfully before the lady, respectfully asked her to follow him, demonstrating his manners and desire to provide the necessary service at this important moment. The two of them walked slowly across the bridge, which rose majestically above the river, the water quietly murmuring below, creating a calming background for their conversations and thoughts about what awaited them ahead. The aristocrats would talk behind her back about the lady of the German family, who was famous for her bad reputation, and whisper about her strange antics and provocative behavior, which always became a subject of discussion at social gatherings. A solemn voice announced the arrival of Dame Derman, and immediately rumors began to circulate around her, mingling with the whispers of the aristocrats, who, without embarrassment, discussed her reputation and supposed antics, filling the atmosphere with a slight excitement. It was a very large event, with many people gathered, creating an event that was more like a fun party than a traditional tea party, with noisy conversations, laughter, and colorful outfits. One of the dark-haired men, with a slight mockery on his face, approached the noblewoman and, raising an eyebrow, asked about her health, as if he was interested not so much in the lady's condition as in the opportunity to tease and question her reputation. At that moment, Eli couldn't help but laugh loudly, feeling the many unfriendly glances directed at her from those present, as if laughter caused indignation and condemnation. Standing in front of the girl, the guy assumed that she felt bad from all the dirty rumors and unfriendly looks she faced, and there was a note of sympathy in his voice. Trying to behave with dignity and propriety, the aristocrat collected her thoughts and, looking at the guy with slight contempt, said that it would be better if he came to her personally and asked questions instead of spreading rumors and discussing her behind her back. Suddenly, another woman appeared from behind and, seizing the noblewoman by the arm, called her by name, Rosalita, adding with obvious contempt that she did not believe that she had dared to come here. The loud voice sounded mocking. It was Lady Maria Vermino, the Duke's eldest daughter, with bright blonde hair pulled back into an elaborate updo and dressed in dark, flashy clothing, trimmed with fur and adorned with luxurious touches. She was the first mage in the family, specializing in shields and defense, and had amazing mastery over mana, allowing her to create powerful defensive spells and barriers. Eli did not understand why her interlocutor addressed her informally, with a forced smile, and, gathering her courage, declared that since she had received an invitation, she could not help but come, emphasizing her readiness to participate in the event. Surprised by this answer, Maria froze for a moment, and her expression changed, as if she did not expect Eli to put up such a resistance. Lady Vermino's gaze became more intense, and the forced smile disappeared, replaced by bewilderment. Eli shuddered when she heard that there was some unknown relationship between them, and her heart began to beat faster from anxiety and surprise, realizing that the beauty could be involved in a complex intrigue. The companion's hand fell on Derman's shoulder, and the noblewoman herself approached, carefully making her way towards her, as if wanting to establish closer contact and create an atmosphere of trust between them. Smiling, Maria said they were close enough to share weaknesses and discuss their experiences openly, emphasizing the importance of trust and intimacy in their relationship, which, despite all the rumors, remained strong. Without thinking twice, the aristocrat led her companion forward, pushing Derman into action, as if urging her to leave all doubts behind and immerse herself in the festive atmosphere, where they could enjoy the moment together. Turning around with a sly look, the lady said that they should talk about something important, as if hinting at secrets and intrigues that could change their perception of each other and the environment, adding an element of tension to their conversation. Stopping in the company of other nobles, Eli was surprised to find herself among such influential people, realizing that Vermino clearly had something important to say, and the female attention was focused on waiting for what would happen next. Seeing her friend's confused expression, the woman laughed and, with a slight mockery, stated that she knew Rosalita still relied on her to communicate with other people, as if hinting that her support and advice were needed. All sweaty and embarrassed, Eli began to justify herself to others, explaining that her unsociability was a problem that had been going on since childhood, and despite her efforts, she still found it difficult to open up to people and overcome internal barriers. With a forced smile, she began to explain that she had been afraid of social circles before her debut, and after meeting Lady Vermino, her fears only increased as influential people gathered around her, making her feel insecure. When the conversation suddenly turned to Derman's lover, it made the girl wary and cool, and her face reflected confusion, because the topic touched upon in the conversation opened up new horizons of intrigue and gossip. The nobles were brazen and did not hesitate to spread rumors, even in front of the main heroine of these fictitious stories, thus enjoying the opportunity to stir up intrigues and scandals that could attract attention and cause discussion. Maria, as if nothing had happened, looked to the side and sang that she could help her companion find that very same escaped artist, as if frivolously ignoring the tension in the air and hinting at her connections and influence. After which, looking directly at the Blue Princess, she said that he should be somewhere in the capital of this kingdom, emphasizing the importance of the information and hinting that she might have ideas or sources that would help in the search. However, instead of gratitude, Eli rudely approached her interlocutor and growled that she had interfered with her personal life in public, which surprised everyone present, causing shock and bewilderment in those around her. Maria grabbed her friend's hand again and added that she wouldn't mind walking the lady to the carriage, trying to hide from the other aristocrats who were watching their squabble with curiosity, as if wanting to avoid unnecessary attention. Birds, fluttering merrily among the tall trees, deftly maneuvered in the light breeze that gently swayed the leaves, creating a melodic whisper of nature and an atmosphere of peace, as if the world itself had breathed in fresh air. The move was a real challenge, especially when it came time to leave their home, because Vermino promised that she had not lied about where the fugitive actually was. With her head bowed, the noblewoman did not demand any special treatment, neither love nor hate. She simply wanted to be perceived as an equal among others, without unnecessary attention or bias. Moreover, at this moment, Maria no longer felt such a strong dislike for Lady Derman, and, surprised by her feelings, openly admitted it, realizing that sometimes hatred can give way to understanding and compassion. Holding back her emotions only through bitterness, Eli promised herself that she would give her a real dressing down the next time they met, when she would finally have the opportunity to express all her feelings and discontent. Waving her hand with a slight smile and genuine warmth in her heart, Maria said goodbye to her guest, hoping that they would soon meet again to discuss all the unspoken thoughts and feelings that had been accumulating between them. Laughing, Lady Vermino asked curiously to tell how exactly she killed that scoundrel who dared to show a nude portrait of a noble lady in front of everyone, insulting a woman's honor and dignity. The carriage moved slowly and majestically through the narrow streets of the city, creaking its wheels and leaving behind a light cloud of dust, while passers-by, stopping and whispering, watched the movement with curiosity, trying to see who was inside. Chloe shuddered tensely when she learned that Philip had been discovered near the capital, and anxiety gripped the beauty because this could lead to unpredictable consequences for everyone involved in their dangerous affairs. The aristocrat remained silent and did not answer the question of whether Madame Vermino had told her about this, realizing that any words could lead to undesirable consequences and intrigue. The bitterness that gripped the innocent heart, sitting down next to the hostess, whispered that all this could be a deception, and the big road ahead seemed long and winding, full of uncertainty and disturbing thoughts. Eli was not worried about such difficulties and obstacles because it was important for her to find out the truth that could change the course of events, and she was ready to overcome any trials to achieve this goal, stopping at nothing. Chloe asked what exactly the Marquis had said about this, and whether he had given his permission for such a long walk, because she was interested to know his opinion and the possible reasons behind this decision. Eli was adamant and determined, ready to set out on her journey in any case, even without an escort, confident in her strength and desire to find the truth, despite all the possible dangers that could await on this dangerous path. Chloe firmly stated in response, clasping her hands in front of her in a determined gesture, that she would go with her, not wanting to leave her friend, as well as her good-natured mistress, alone on such an important and risky journey. Suddenly, the guard knocked loudly on the carriage window and, slightly opening the curtain, announced with a slight sense of relief that they had finally arrived at their destination, and a feeling of anticipation and excitement hung in the air, foreshadowing new exciting events. Smiling, the maiden announced that she had finally come up with a way to force her parents to let the goddess go to the capital, and there was confidence in her voice, full of hope for a bright future and new opportunities. The family was surprised and asked their daughter again why she wanted to go to the capital so much, because they did not understand what exactly prompted their little girl to take such a decisive step and what her plans were for the future. The mother was afraid to let her child go so far, even if her eldest son was nearby, because in her heart there was anxiety for her daughter's safety and concern that they might encounter unknown dangers along the way. Benjamin reassured his mother, confidently saying that they needed to deliver humanitarian aid in any case, because it was important not only for them, but also for many people in need who were counting on their support and care. Unable to calm down, the woman turned to her daughter, asking why she was so eager to go to such a distant and unfamiliar place, because the enormous anxiety about the future of her precious daughter only grew stronger with every word. Eli decided not to hide the truth and said directly that it was there that they saw the escaped scoundrel, an artist known for his dishonest behavior, and this only strengthened the woman's determination to set off on the journey. After listening calmly, the mother learned that the maiden had insisted on going there to break off her ties with her former lover, and this decision had caused her mixed feelings, full of concern and anxiety for her daughter's well-being. The happy girl shouted for her family not to worry, as she was going there with her brother, who always took care of her and was a reliable support, ready to protect her in any situation. But then Benjamin suggested that perhaps if Philip was indeed in the capital, he might already be dead, and this thought hung in the air, causing alarm and uneasiness among all present. The city itself, located in the center of the country, recently suffered from devastating flooding and has been slowly recovering, leaving behind traces of the disaster and reminding residents of the difficulties they will have to face in the future. People ran in panic in different directions, trying to escape the rapid waves of water that grew with each passing moment, filling the streets and turning the city into a disaster zone. Upon learning that there was also an epidemic in the city, Eli stopped and asked if it was dangerous now, as it added even more anxiety to the already existing situation and jeopardized their plans. Benjamin happily showed off his antivirus mask, assuring everyone that it would keep them safe, adding that he also took an antidote with him that could protect against possible infection. Moreover, Benjamin was ready to go to the capital even without his sister, determined to find the villain and punish him for all the crimes he had committed, because he understood that the safety of his family was above all else and was ready to risk everything. They soon arrived in the capital, where they were greeted by grim destruction and a deathly silence that hung in the air, as if the atmosphere itself reflected the pain and suffering of the inhabitants left behind by the recent disasters. Doctors and nurses rushed to help the people who were injured and lying on the ground, trying to provide first aid to those who needed their care most and ease their suffering at this difficult moment. Putting on a mask against the virus, Eli realized that everything was much worse than she imagined, and felt fear and anxiety completely take over the beauty when she saw the scale of the disaster and suffering around her. The brother needed to leave for a while, and he insistently asked his sister not to go far, so as not to get lost in this chaos and to be safe, because the situation around them was becoming more and more dangerous and unpredictable. Looking around, Eli didn't know where to start looking, especially considering that Philip could have died after the epidemic, leaving the lady completely confused and without hope that the goddess could find him. Not far away, men carried heavy loads of sacks, working hard, sweating, and trying to finish their job as quickly as possible to help rebuild the city after the destruction. Without thinking twice, Eli decided to help them by coming closer and offering her strength. For this, the men thanked her heartily from the bottom of their hearts, expressing their gratitude for such support during this difficult time. They were all amazed by the lady who, without much effort, lifted several bags at a time, demonstrating incredible strength and determination, which left a deep impression on them. Suddenly, one of the guys, carefully observing what was happening around, said that he noticed how the lady was attentively and persistently looking for someone, and his voice was filled with curiosity. In such chaos and destruction, it was incredibly difficult to find someone. The boy, full of determination, offered his help, confidently declaring that together they could quickly find the one the noblewoman was looking for, because he knew the city well and all the nooks and crannies, as well as places where people could hide. The search began throughout the capital, huge and confusing, with narrow streets and abandoned buildings, where every step was filled with hope and anxiety, because finding someone in such a crowded city was a real challenge. Frustrated, Eli sat down next to the box, tiredly running her hands over its surface, realizing that in 3 long days full of futile searches and hopes, they could not find a single clue that could lead them to the person they were looking for. As a humanitarian aid, food was given to people in the central square to support them in difficult times and help them cope with the consequences. When the city was going through hard times, and many families were left without means, walking through the narrow streets of the city, Eli wondered to herself whether she should go deeper into the dark corners to try to find her artist, who might be hiding in these shadowy and forgotten places, away from the eyes of people. The lady, deciding to take a risk, went around the corner, to a place where there was impenetrable darkness and not a soul in sight, finding in this silence a feeling of strange anticipation and anxiety, as if the atmosphere itself concealed something mysterious and dangerous. Suddenly, the aristocrat's cloak was grabbed by a man who was also hidden under a hood, which suddenly brought a sense of danger and tension into this dark environment, causing the woman's heart to beat faster. The noblewoman froze in shock, her eyes narrowing in surprise and horror as she recognized the stranger who had suddenly appeared before her in this dark alley, causing her to instantly remember her past filled with fear. It was the same man from her memories, with the dark hair and gray eyes that had once been so deeply imprinted on her soul. He looked haggard and full of hope. He asked carefully if she had been part of the rescue team. Kneeling before the noble maiden, he asked her for an antiviral antidote with desperation and pleading in his voice, ready to pay any price just to get a chance to be saved from the terrible disease that threatened his life. The man's hands trembled with fear and excitement as he desperately admitted that he was strictly forbidden to be in the quarantine zone, as it could have serious consequences for both him and those around him. The boy showed signs of being infected. Red, inflamed eyes, chapped, cracked lips, and deep scars from the rash on his skin indicated a serious condition that was only made worse by desperation. Hearing that he would indeed be given an antidote, the boy rejoiced with hope, but the joy quickly turned to fear when the lady, taking off her mask, revealed her face, full of determination and sadness at the same time. In the savior, he recognized the one whom he had previously killed, poisoning with an expensive poison, and his heart sank with horror and great guilt when he realized that it was she who now stood before him, ready to save him. Eli, her angry red eyes flashing, said coldly that it was quite funny to hear pleas from a man who had previously laughed at the death of a noblewoman, as if he did not realize that his own life was now hanging by a thread. Philip froze in place, not believing his eyes, and looked at his interlocutor in horror. His mind refused to accept the reality of what was happening, and his heart pounded as if it was trying to escape from his chest from horror and surprise. The aristocrat roughly grabbed the man by the cloak and pulled him towards her, forcing him to look into her furious eyes, full of hatred and condemnation, which reflected all the suffering and insults inflicted in the past. With a mocking and cruel smile, Eli asked if the scoundrel was surprised that she remained alive, and added that those atrocities did not go unpunished, and now the guy would be forced to face the consequences of his actions. Kneeling and holding the scoundrel by his clothes, the goddess asked him what Philip now wanted from her: mercy, an antidote, or salvation, realizing that at this moment he had no trump cards left to escape justice. The woman's body shook with rage and suppressed anger at the mere sight of the escaped, betraying artist, whom she once considered a friend, but now hated with all her heart. The evil noblewoman sharply ordered the boy to shut his mouth and listen to her carefully, because his fate depended on it. If the scoundrel did not want to find himself on the brink of a terrible death, he had to learn every word. Philip, with a trembling voice and despair in his eyes, tried to justify himself, claiming that he had been forced to kill his beloved and that he himself was only a victim of circumstances. But Eli, sparkling with anger, did not believe a single word he said. The noblewoman, with cold determination and fury in her eyes, ordered her trembling interlocutor to be prepared to pay in full for all the countless suffering and betrayal that he had caused her in the past. Having finally released the man from her arms, the maiden was in no hurry to take his life, wanting first to find out the reasons that forced him to commit murder and what prompted him to such betrayal. Philip clearly didn't know that Eli had lost her memory, and, at a loss, he opened his mouth to begin making useless excuses. But absolutely every attempt seemed useless, as if the words were stuck halfway. But the noblewoman interrupted him, sternly warning him not to lie. Her cold voice sounded like an order, emphasizing the importance of honesty in this tense situation, when the truth could be the only salvation. Eli froze at these words, realizing that the horns appeared before her again, and a storm of emotions arose within her, tearing her fragile inner world into pieces, since this memory became the cause of bewilderment and anxiety. The horns were a symbol of the Black Dragon, personifying its mighty power and dark secrets, which left an indelible mark in legends and traditions, causing fear and awe in people before the greatness of this entity, capable of both destroying and protecting. The guy walked among the boxes, having promised her before that he would tell her everything after receiving the antidote, and was even ready to arrange a meeting with the dragons for the girl to reveal all the secrets that he kept in his heart. Philip approached the crow, and, in addition, the man promised the Marquis's daughter that he would meet her in the evening to discuss important issues and share news that could change their destinies. When the raven landed on the man's hand, it quietly told him that Rosalita was alive, and the Lord needed to know about it as soon as possible, since this news could change the course of events and influence their further actions. The city was large and noisy, and around it there were dense forests, full of secret paths and mysterious sounds, creating a vivid impression as if nature itself was wrapping itself in its green blanket. There, among the dense groves, stood two cloaked figures, one in front, confidently embracing the space with its presence, and the other behind, watching everything with caution, ready to spring into action at any moment. Following the artist, Eli couldn't help but notice how they were going deeper and deeper into the forest, where thick trees sheltered them from the sunlight, creating a mysterious atmosphere full of anticipation and mystery. She had a large hammer at her back, held firmly in her hand like a reliable weapon, and she was on guard, aware that there could be traps and dangers lurking around every corner in this forest, requiring her to use her utmost concentration. Philip himself shuddered and flinched uncomfortably, feeling how the girl next to him released a negative aura of hatred that seemed to envelop him, reminding him that a maiden can hide much more within herself than it seemed at first glance. When the boy thanked the lady for the medicine, the lady put her hand on his shoulder and explained that she did it not for his sake, but to find out the truth that she was looking for. Every action was dictated by the thirst to solve the mysteries of the past. It was impossible not to notice how Rosalita had changed. Previously, she was a kind and naive lady, always ready to help others, and now her look and manner of communication showed confidence and determination. Irritated and full of anger, the beauty asked with contempt what nonsense this man was talking about, because after she was poisoned, the girl simply could not be kind and merciful to him. They soon arrived at the place, and Philip, feeling a wave of excitement, immediately announced the beginning of an important meeting, meeting his interlocutors with expectant glances, who listened attentively to every word. The two friends stood next to the huge boulder, which looked truly impressive and imposing, causing admiration for its massiveness and grandeur, as if nature itself had decided to create something grandiose for the spectators. Philip carefully picked up the medallion with his hand, and pointing it towards the stone, cast an ancient spell to remove the disguise and destroy the barrier that hid them from prying eyes, allowing them to finally see the hidden secrets. A mysterious passage opened up before them, shrouded in thick darkness, which, like an invisible curtain, hid many secrets and mysteries waiting to be revealed, beckoning them to adventure and risking encounters with the unknown. Tired and depressed, Eli thought that it would be much easier to take the amulet from the nobleman and leave this place, and later return with her brother and the necessary help, avoiding all this trouble. Then suddenly, a mysterious figure with dark wings appeared behind the lady, which resembled either a dragon or a raven, inspiring fear and admiration at the same time with its grandeur and mystery. Something big fell to the ground with a crash, taking the lady with it, who instantly lost her balance and found herself on the ground, shocked by what had happened. Feeling sharp claws on her shoulders, Eli cried out, demanding to know who this impudent intruder of personal space was, who had suddenly invaded her world and disturbed her peace, leaving her in a state of confusion and anxiety. The dragon quickly grabbed the girl with his powerful claws and lifted her into the air, carrying her away, as if taking his precious prey, leaving behind only a gusty wind and a sense of imminent danger. Eli screamed in fear as the distance between her and the ground quickly increased, and the woman's heart began to pound with horror and panic because she understood that every second brought her closer to the unknown and dangerous. The monster with huge wings smiled joyfully and said that he was immensely happy that the blue princess remained alive, because it gave him strength and confidence in his intentions, enriching his world with unusual emotions and adventures. This was the same general secretary who had once stood next to the famous artist, skillfully pouring into his former beloved a poisonous mixture full of envy, jealousy, and merciless melancholy, which ultimately led to their tragic separation. The man asked the girl not to move if she did not want him to accidentally drop her, because in this position, any unexpected movement could lead to trouble and a sad ending. The two of them slowly approached the majestic dark building, which, like a ghost, stood out against the starry sky and was shrouded in mysterious darkness, full of unknown secrets and mysteries. The swiftly winged one, like an indomitable storm, began to rapidly descend towards its dark refuge, causing the goddess to let out a frightened cry that spread across the sky like a harbinger of trouble. Upon landing, Eli felt her soul leaving her body again after such a terrible and restless flight, leaving behind a heavy feeling of anxiety and bewilderment, as if the beauty was on the verge between two worlds. Putting his hand to his chest, the guy smiled and showed the lady their happy home, which radiated warmth and comfort, and introduced himself as Theo, confident that this was the beginning of a new life for both of them. While the man stood modestly behind him, his hands folded in front of him, the lady looked around the room, which looked dirty and dark, the emptiness of which seemed to evoke a feeling of abandonment and desolation, leaving a barely noticeable hint of melancholy in the air. The door didn't look particularly strong, as if it could easily be broken with one blow, as if it wasn't made of a strong material, but something much more fragile and unreliable. Eli noticed that there was a strange smell coming from there, and the light gusts of wind rushing through the room intensified this feeling, adding even more mystery and anxiety to the atmosphere. Turning to the monster, she asked with concern in her voice if there were anyone else besides him in this dark, abandoned building, where every step echoed in the silence, making her heart beat faster. Theo, embarrassed, quietly said that there was also Ren, who had recently gone to help the master artist with his affairs, hoping that his help would be useful and would not displease the master, whose reputation was well known in their area. The Virgin remembered that Philip had mentioned something about this man in one of his memories, as if his words had gone unnoticed at the time, but now had acquired a new meaning and importance, as a key to solving what was happening. Eli, full of hope and determination, turned to the majestic dragon for help, who happily agreed to help, his eyes shining with brightness, and his face expressing ecstatic inspiration. Raising her hand high to the heavens, the goddess, with a piercing gaze and an enigmatic smile, asked if Theo knew a man with horns who, according to rumors, possessed extraordinary strength and could change the course of fate. The man, thoughtfully rubbing his chin, replied that yes, he had a sister named Leah, a demoness with majestic horns. She was a noble lady and was distinguished by her amazing beauty, which attracted everyone's attention. He then added with obvious admiration that when Leah grows up, she will definitely become a real dragon, possessing not only incredible strength, but also a majestic grace, which will make her even more magnificent than ever before. Eli was deeply surprised that the dragons had previously discussed her, exchanging opinions and admiring comments, full of interest and curiosity about life and destiny. Thinking that this was something incredible, Theo smiled and said that his little blue-haired sister had actually seen dragons in their true form before. However, Philip decided that she had to be destroyed to keep this secret. Suddenly, the man remembered that he also had to pick up Mr. Artist, but he had completely forgotten about it. Quickly spreading his mighty wings, he soared into the air, leaving behind him the desire to complete his task without losing a minute. Theo, with a slight anxiety in his voice, asked the princess not to go anywhere, assuring her that he would soon return with an artist who could add color to their wonderful world and bring long-awaited news. The lady, dressed in an exquisite dress, closed her eyes as the cold wind rushing through the streets sharply brushed her face, causing a feeling of slight bliss, and at the same time making her think about the changeability of the weather and the whims of fate. In his memoirs, Philip said that Rosalita witnessed something she should not have seen, and this event left an indelible mark on their lives, forcing them to rethink their relationships and choices. Surely, when she was in the imperial palace, the lady witnessed how her sister, still a child, played in a flowering meadow where she was surrounded by gentle rays of the sun, creating an atmosphere of childish innocence. She met her in the form of a small dragon, extending a friendly hand forward, as if wishing to express her sincere readiness for friendship and understanding, despite the differences in their worlds. This discovery gave the goddess all the answers to her questions, confirming that Rosalita was killed because of her fears of the winged creatures, and at the same time left her with an inexpressible feeling of sadness and sorrow. However, the question arose as to how another dragon appeared after the first was sealed under a tree protected by centuries-old spells. This mystery tormented everyone, because everyone knew that such creatures do not just appear in the world. The World Tree, although not in the best condition, still retained its power, and the seal on it remained active, as well as protecting ancient secrets and protecting the world from the consequences that could occur if it was broken. Eli became wary when she again heard strange sounds coming from behind the door, their vague whispers and dull knocks, awakening anxiety in her, making her heart beat faster and filling the atmosphere with a sense of impending danger. Clutching her hammer tighter, the beautiful noblewoman confidently headed towards the closed doors, and her decisive step betrayed her readiness to meet any challenge that might be hidden behind this barrier. She covered her face and nose with her hand, trying not to smell the foul smell that seeped through the cracks of the door, causing disgust and making her wonder what could be hidden beyond this border, and what terrible secrets could be waiting inside. Hearing a loud cry, the lady quickly rushed towards one of the walls, intending to break it and break through to help the prisoner. Her determination was unwavering, because she understood that sometimes the only way to help another. The stone gave way under the powerful blow, and as a result, a large hole was formed, through which a bright strip of light burst, thereby opening the way to salvation and hope. Suddenly, a man in a dark cloak appeared in front of her, holding a sharp blade in his strong hands, which he threateningly pointed at the lifeless hand of a man lying completely exhausted on the floor. Philip stood frozen with his sword in his hand like a statue, not knowing what to do in this tense situation, while Ely, overcome with anger, screamed, scolding the artist for his inappropriate and terrible actions that put them in a dangerous situation. In a calm and cold tone, the man asked where Theo was, emphasizing that he had very little time left to solve the problem that had arisen, and that his expectations were high. The noblewoman asked irritably if what was happening now was really something worth discussing in such a tense situation, and why everyone around was acting so unreasonably, as if they did not realize how important the current moment was. there were many people lying lifelessly on the floor who had long since left this world. And it was because of this that such a disgusting and suffocating smell hung in the air, causing a feeling of fear and disgust. Staring at the villain with a weapon in his hand, the noblewoman could not understand what was happening here and experienced mixed feelings, realizing that the situation was becoming more and more dangerous and tense. Philip again approached the Blue Princess with the question of whether she wanted to become a priestess of the Grey Wings, emphasizing that this could become a unique opportunity for her to open new horizons and change her destiny. This caused great indignation in the lady, since she had absolutely no intention of taking his side after such a humiliating spectacle, which left a deep mark on her soul. The artist generously gave her another opportunity to carefully and thoroughly consider her answer before making a final decision, thereby demonstrating patience, understanding, and care for feelings and thoughts. Suddenly, the gentleman's leg was grabbed by another man, who, shouting furiously, urged Lady Derman to leave immediately and run as fast as possible to escape the impending danger, leaving only confusion in his wake. The knight stood up to defend the noblewoman with determination, holding his sword in front of him, his confidence and nobility radiating a powerful aura, instilling hope and calm in such a troubling moment. The young knight, full of determination, promised that he would protect the lady, swearing by the honor of his grandfather, whose noble deeds and bravery served as an inspiration to him, giving him confidence in his own abilities. Tired, the girl, exhausted from her experiences, lay on the guy's back and tried to understand whether his previous owner knew this body, what was happening to them now, and what secret he could hide in his soul. Philip, with a heavy heart, listened silently to the accusations against him, absorbing every word as the boy was called a traitor, claiming that he had switched sides and not realizing the full depth of the contradictions that raged within him. Waving his hands in a hopeless gesture, the artist tried to justify himself, claiming that he had merely taken advantage of a vile chance that had unexpectedly and fatefully come his way on the path to creative self-expression. Annoyed, Eli questioned her former lover to see if his words about being sick were as much of a lie as everything else he had told her in the past, making the goddess doubt the sincerity of his feelings. Philip, after a moment of silence, then smiled and said that the nobleman's love for the Marquis's daughter was sincere and real, despite all the trials and obstacles they had to face. The noblewoman, with contempt and fury, shouted that this was not true love at all, but something perverted and disgusting, completely unworthy of true feelings and the nobility of their position, insulting the very essence of relationships between people. Philip spread his arms out to the sides and, with warmth in his voice, invited the beauty to hug, adding that his position in life had greatly deteriorated during this time, and now he especially lacked support and understanding. The man's pathetic excuses and clumsy attempts made the lady laugh, barely containing her anger, realizing that his words were only a pale shadow of the real feelings and emotions hidden behind the mask of confidence. All those details suggested that they were trying to create an alibi for themselves, but it was unwise to lie, since the truth would still surface at the most inopportune moment. Clutching her head, the girl angrily ordered that these manipulations not be called love, calling the artist real trash who used other people's feelings for selfish purposes, without understanding the full depth of another person's suffering. Philip tightened his grip on his sword, ready to finish the girl if this was the final answer to his questions, when suddenly a winged man appeared next to him, as if from nowhere, inspiring both fear and hope with his presence. Theo and Ren, who was a young man with short black hair and sharp claws ready for action, appeared next to them, giving him a frightening appearance. The knight squeaked in fear as he saw more people appearing nearby, and realizing that he was unable to protect his lady, his heart sank with fear, and his thoughts were filled with anxious premonitions of what might happen. Turning to the lady, the guy warned her to be careful, as these scoundrels were a serious threat, and he did not want her to end up in a distressing situation due to their treachery and cruelty. Ren angrily turned to the artist, stating that he was completely useless, since the man he had killed had suddenly come back from the dead, which undermined his entire work and raised many questions about what was really going on. Philip tried to justify himself by explaining that he had left the lady alive in order to kill her in front of the gentleman, believing that this would be the most cruel and humiliating decision, which would only strengthen his authority and frighten everyone around him. Pointing his finger at the noblewoman, Ren, with cold determination, ordered his subordinate to destroy her immediately, knowing that this cruel act would not only confirm loyalty, but would also be an important guarantee of status among others. The guy firmly stated that if the artist did not carry out the order, he would meet his own death in agony, emphasizing the seriousness of his words and demonstrating that he was not joking, but was ready to go all the way to achieve the desired result. The Blue Princess clapped her hands and laughed, mockingly declaring that they were all such ridiculous idiots that they betrayed each other, as if they did not understand the absurdity of their situation and the futility of their attempts to hide their true intentions. Grasping the lady's clothing with her hand, she made it clear that she was not a victim and had no intention of dying, demonstrating a determination and fortitude that left no room for doubt in the woman's intentions. The dragons watched in amazement as the top layer of fabric flew away, as if caught by the wind, behind the brave maiden, who, unafraid of danger, boldly moved forward, leaving behind a trail of surprise and admiration. Eli fiercely declared that she was ready to fight and give her life. Her angry veins bulged on her face, and her eyes burned with a furious fire, reflecting all the determination and readiness to fight until the last breath. As the lady stood majestically before them, the men could not contain their surprise. Theo himself, filled with fear, cowered next to his brother, feeling excitement and anxiety growing within him. Philip, covering his mouth with his hand, could hardly comprehend that in front of him stood the woman he had once loved, but now could not recognize. A storm of emotions broke out in his heart, and memories of lost love overwhelmed him. Before the man could even utter a word about how much Rosalita had changed, Eli suddenly froze, preparing to strike from behind, the hammer already firmly in the woman's hands, and the tension was building. The hammer fell upon the artist at the moment when the maiden screamed, demanding that he not dare point a finger at her again, and her voice sounded with fury and determination, as if calling for justice for all the wrongs she had suffered. The beauty, with a commanding and confident tone in her voice, ordered her interlocutor to stop breaking the drama, confidently emphasizing that she had not hit him at all, but had only acted half-heartedly, also playing a dangerous game with him. The guy cried bitterly, listening to his ex-lover furiously swearing to turn life into a living hell, and in those moments, his body was torn apart by pain and betrayal, as if all dreams of happiness had vanished into thin air. Ren cast a spell in the form of a black arrow, concentrating and preparing to strike the noblewoman, her face reflecting determination and readiness for action, as if magical energy was in the air. In the end, the damage was not done to her, but to the back of the guy she was covering herself with, and this unexpected turn of events shocked everyone, leaving tension and bewilderment in the air. Ren, with his hand raised, said that Rosalita was different from others, as even swordmasters would have a hard time dodging such an attack, thus emphasizing her exceptional skill and strength, which inspired respect. The lady agreed with a smile that she was not ordinary, but was the protector of the Holy Hammer, which guarded love and justice in the Empire, personifying hope and strength that could inspire others to do good deeds. Theo was deeply impressed, unlike his brother, who looked at the old noblewoman with bewilderment, not understanding what she could do to intrigue the younger of them so much, and his facial expression reflected complete disbelief at what was happening. Eli herself realized that she had problems, because Ren turned out to be a strong opponent, capable of causing her fear and respect at the same time, forcing her to think about her abilities and fighting strategy. And the hammer, after such a blow, was barely holding on with its last strength, ready to fall apart, like an exhausted warrior who continues to fight with difficulty, despite all the trials. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, Eli noticed the knight holding out the old sphere behind his back, acting in secret and trying not to attract attention to himself, which made her confused and wary. The boy himself was sincerely glad that the lady had finally noticed him and the object he was holding in his hand, filling him with hope that all his efforts would not be in vain, and the guard would be able to prove his importance in this world. Looking at the girl and giving her secret signs, the man was ready to use this bomb so that they could escape together later, confident that this risky plan would be their chance for freedom. The girl herself, frozen in bewilderment, frankly did not understand why the knight showed her this thing, and why the boy decided to entrust the lady with such an important item, causing her surprise and many questions. When Ren gave the order to stop saying such nonsense, the dragon suddenly noticed that the body of the failed artist was suddenly thrown towards him, as if such words had summoned an unknown force. Eli herself realized that it was time to run, and without slowing her rapid pace, she picked up the weak guy in her arms, trying to escape from the dangerous situation and run away as far as possible. The guy had a round bomb in his hands, which he began to nervously twist from side to side, and also tried to figure out how to turn this thing off, not realizing the seriousness of the strange situation. Theo rushed after them, spreading his powerful wings and ready to rush into pursuit at any second, determined not to lose sight of them, despite all the dangers that awaited him ahead. Without thinking twice, the boy decisively threw the explosives towards the kidnappers, hoping that this would stop them and give him a chance to save himself and the charming beauty who was in trouble. The mansion, which stood quietly and inconspicuously in the forest, shrouded in the shadows of the trees, seemed mysterious and even a little ominous, as if it kept many secrets within itself. Suddenly, a loud explosion was heard, destroying the wretched structure to its foundations and sending clouds of debris into the air, creating a deafening noise that echoed throughout the surrounding area. Eli, sitting in the middle of the ruins, angrily grumbled that up until this point, the knight had said that they only had 10 seconds to escape, not one, and this made her feel even more unbearably offended. The knight himself lay unconscious on the ground, covered with his wounds, like a broken hero who had lost all hope in this cruel world, where every moment could be his last. Fuente froze in place, turned to his subordinate, and asked if he had heard strange sounds coming from the depths of the forest that were causing him concern and anxiety. He waved his hand to his guards, and, with a slight note of alarm in his voice, said that, apparently, the base of the gray wings should be somewhere nearby, which suggested a possible threat, and they should be especially vigilant. The prince began to tell them to focus on the mission, but suddenly froze. The words caught on his lips, and he stopped, as if he felt something dangerous approaching that filled him with fear. Somehow he managed to catch the girl, who literally fell on him from the sky, like an angel descending from above, and their unexpected meeting left him completely confused. It was Lady Derman, who, smiling, was immensely glad to see her old friend, and their meeting filled the air with the warmth of memories of past adventures. Rushing to embrace the future emperor, she shouted with delight that she was in huge trouble, and there was a note of panic in her female voice that instantly attracted the attention of everyone around. The beauty, upset and full of despair, sobbed into the shoulder of her savior, confessing that she did not know what to do now, and her fragile heart was filled with anxiety, as if the whole world was collapsing around her. The man asked in response how the girl had ended up alone in the dark forest, and his stern voice sounded with a slight hint of alarm, as if he had a premonition that there was something serious behind this story. As if nothing had happened, Eli asked exactly the same question to her companion, which greatly angered the future ruler, causing irritation and discontent in him, and his light eyes flashed with bright anger. The guards who stood further away asked their captain who this strange maiden was, who found herself in his arms, and in their voices there was curiosity mixed with bewilderment. The man explained that this beauty was the daughter of the Marquis of Derman, and added that they should not ask any more questions in order to avoid unnecessary complications and not attract unnecessary attention to themselves. The couple exchanged awkward glances and settled down opposite each other. The prince, not understanding how all this would continue, held the noblewoman tightly in his arms, feeling how tension and uncertainty filled the atmosphere of their unexpected meeting. Dropping back to the ground, Eli stood before the emperor, feeling how roughly she had been thrown from his arms, causing her to have mixed emotions and a sense of awkwardness. Remembering what had happened just recently, the aristocrat covered her mouth with her hand, full of surprise and anxiety, and said that not far from them, on the side of the road, a man was lying unconscious, with no signs of life. The knight lay on the grass, oblivious to the world around him, his dark hair disheveled across the soft green carpet, his eyes tightly closed, as if he were in a deep sleep or oblivion. The hereditary prince turned to his companion with obvious concern, asking what exactly had happened that they found themselves in such a shabby state, which was completely out of keeping with their usual way of life. The handsome man and future ruler could not understand how the main scout of their group ended up here, almost dying, and what could have led to such a terrible situation that left him in such a state. Eli looked down and said with bitterness and despair that the rest of the Empire's knights had died in the brutal battle, leaving them all alone in the chaos and destruction that had engulfed their world in an instant. Fuente asked with a cold gaze where they were before they ran away. His voice was emotionless, but there was a hint of displeasure in it, as if he couldn't believe their recklessness. Eli hesitated, not knowing where to start, but still decided to tell her friend about the mysterious sect of Grey Wings that captivated women's thoughts and raised many questions about their true intentions. When she finally decided to tell the truth, the man began to question her about how they managed to find and get into this mysterious refuge of fallen dragons, full of dangers and mysteries, which were rumored. The truth was that the villain, Philip, had brought the girl inside, with the promise of revealing secrets that could change everything she knew about the fallen dragons and their true nature. Looking away, the lady added that he was her former lover, who sought to make the beautiful lady a Grey Priestess, using her power and knowledge to achieve his own dark goals. The shelter itself was hidden by a magical dome that was almost impossible to break, protecting it from uninvited guests and keeping secret all the horrors and mysteries that lurked within. Brushing the hair out of her face that was preventing her from concentrating, the lady added that he had used the bomb to escape, leaving behind only destruction and chaos that had consumed everything in its path. Fuente was pleased with the answer, but, approaching the lady closer, he gently placed his hand on her cheek and asked solicitously whether the noblewoman herself had suffered, and his voice sounded soft, full of care and sincere interest in her well-being. The maiden could not believe that she was communicating with the future emperor, and, struck by this discovery, she stared at him in surprise. The woman's thoughts were spinning between admiration and bewilderment. In response, Eli heard that it was undesirable for her brother to take her away, as he was very scary when angry, and no one would want to face his wrath, especially at such a difficult time. Remembering her missing relative, the maiden ran in panic, adjusting her clothes as she went and trying not to lose sight of the crown prince, who was following her, determined to help. Fuente was upset that he couldn't get her to call him by his real name, while the knight reported that their colleague had finally regained consciousness, which fueled hope for rescue. The future ruler ordered his loyal subordinate to ensure that the aristocrat returned home safely, leaving no chance for surprises along the way. After this, he sighed with great relief, smiled, and decided that he would formally introduce himself to her at the next banquet, hoping that this would be the beginning of something important between them. Eli sneezed suddenly, as if someone had called her from afar, and at that moment, her heart began to beat faster, filling her with a feeling of strange anticipation, as if fate itself was whispering about the approaching changes. Before this, the lady plunged into a cold nearby stream, trying to wash away all traces of dirt and anxiety that had accumulated during all the dangerous adventures, hoping to start with a clean slate. Benjamin cautiously entered her chambers, inquiring about his sister's whereabouts, his voice filled with both concern and hope, reflecting deep concern for her well-being. Wrapped in a blanket, the girl waved him off, trying to calm him down, and with effort said that everything was fine, although deep down she knew that the situation was far from ideal. The brother's secretary stood nearby, waiting for the gentleman to have a free minute to discuss a number of important issues that required immediate attention and decision. The guy himself carefully adjusted the blanket on his sister, realizing that she had become cold, and gently pressed it to her shoulders, trying to create comfort and protection for her in this difficult moment. Benjamin, with a warm smile, asked his relative not to worry, assuring her that he was ready to solve all her problems and would do everything possible to ease any worries and restore peace and tranquility to her life. At the words that her brother was ready to bring the artist here, the lady jumped up from her seat, exclaiming in panic that he should not do it. Her voice was filled with alarm and urgency, as if it were a matter of life and death. The girl was overcome with a strong fear that Philip could cause serious pain to the man, and as a result, he would end up on the ground, badly beaten and completely defenseless, suffering from violence and humiliation. Sweating, Eli forced a smile onto her face and quickly said that she no longer cared about anything except the fugitive artist, who she felt had become a part of her, causing her mixed feelings. Benjamin blushed with joy when he heard that his little sister was now being taken in only by her beloved family, including that one, and his heart was filled with warm feelings when he realized that they were all together in this unusual situation. With care, he hugged the girl who was sitting on the bed and looking at him with sincere joy, feeling how the warmth of their relationship filled the room, creating an atmosphere of happiness and comfort that enveloped them like a soft blanket on a cold winter evening. With a smile, Benjamin said that he had great news for her. At the banquet, her friend Leah would receive the title of Sage, which would be an important event for everyone. Eli, filled with unexpected delight, exclaimed upon hearing the familiar name that the dragons had been constantly talking about in their mysterious hideout when they had decided to destroy the entire intelligence department of the Crown Prince. They said that the girl was still very young, but in the future, she had every chance to become a powerful and strong dragon, possessing unique abilities and unlimited potential. But 80 years have already passed since someone was granted the title of Sage, which became a real event that left a deep mark on history, and now many remember it with respect and reverence. Sitting on the bed, Benjamin explained that a title like Sage was very rare, and for this reason, the entire empire was incredibly excited, because receiving it meant not only personal recognition, but also hope for a new time. Grabbing the lady's chin, Benjamin suddenly remembered that his sister had lost her memory and no longer remembered her old friend, which caused feelings in his heart full of sadness about how to restore the lost memories. The girl agreed with interest, and wanting to know more, asked her relative to tell her more about another noble lady who was known for her exquisite taste, talent, and wisdom. The man, with a slight smile, leaned slightly next to the lady and promised to tell her everything he knew, including important details and interesting facts that told more about the future sage of the empire. Leah was born outside the royal family, and her mother, faced with difficulties and unexpected circumstances, appeared before the people already with a child in her arms, which caused many rumors and speculations among the inhabitants of the kingdom. However, the baby was raised in a large and luxurious palace of the empire, surrounded by attention, despite her humble origins, which allowed her to absorb all the riches of the culture and traditions that reigned in this majestic place. The Blue Princess froze at the words about Leah being an amazing mage from birth. The shock and surprise on her face showed that she realized how significant the fate of this girl could be, capable of changing the world around her. The brother understood this surprise, because previously they had only one such powerful magician, and now the princess, possessing such unique abilities, could become as powerful as the previous magician, which opened up new horizons of possibilities. Noticing that Eli had her head down, the guy asked excitedly if she was okay. The man's voice was filled with care and concern, because he could not remain indifferent to her sadness and wanted to know what was troubling his sister's heart. Without thinking twice, worried about the health of his relative, the aristocrat stood up and rushed to the doctor, rushing to find help to make sure that Eli received the necessary attention and care at this anxious moment. The aristocrat herself, clutching her head, muttered that there should not have been a single wizard left on this island. After all, the thought that someone who possessed magic could remain here filled her with anxiety and fear. When the dragon was sealed beneath the mighty ancient tree, all of its magic was lost forever, leaving the world in deep confusion and sadness, as if life itself had been robbed of its magical breath and lost its light forever. Doubled over, the lady realized that she should tell the gods about the possibility of awakening the dragon. However, if she did, they would certainly pile even more accusations on her, which would worsen her already difficult situation. Deciding to rest and not be seen by the princess during the banquet, Eli settled comfortably on the bed, putting on a face mask to relieve stress and relax, immersing herself in pleasant thoughts away from the noise. Suddenly, the silence of the mistress's chambers was broken by an excited servant who burst into the room with undisguised excitement and loudly exclaimed about the upcoming banquet, which was to take place soon. Rising from her seat, Eli asked with slight bewilderment why the servants were so worried about her and what exactly she could have done to cause them concern. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity and interest. The embarrassed maid exclaimed loudly that they were all experiencing a deep excitement and emotion that they did not even suspect, and this feeling was growing with every moment, taking hold of them more and more. Waving her hand to the side, she showed the noblewoman with a slight smile that they had already carefully prepared for her magnificent jewelry and a luxurious dress, waiting for its time to emphasize her beauty and grace. Chloe, urging her hostess behind the curtain, insistently told her that, being the bride of a prince, she would be the object of everyone's attention, and therefore it was worth paying attention to the details of her image in order to look flawless. Surprised, Eli froze in place, unable to move, as if time had stopped around her, and all her feelings were intertwined into one. It was a whirlwind of emotions, making her heart beat faster and making her think about what would happen next. The servants behind smiled, thinking that the lady was embarrassed, because the prince was indeed not only noble, but also had an attractive appearance, which, undoubtedly, could not leave the noblewoman indifferent. Chloe, by making a sign to the maid standing behind her, made it clear that they must do everything possible to ensure that the hostess shined brighter than anyone else at the banquet, attracting admiring glances and admiration from the guests with her impeccable appearance. On this beautiful day, when the sun's rays were cheerfully playing on the surface, the large mansion, surrounded by greenery, became a true embodiment of beauty and comfort, creating an atmosphere of peace and harmony. The girls' parents finally realized that they themselves had become very worried and anxious after all the worries and concerns about the behavior of the servants, who had been disturbing their peace for a long time. The guy, slightly bowing his head and with a slight nostalgia in his voice, admitted that they had not attended such events for a long time, and therefore were very much looking forward to this special day, full of excitement, joy, and unexpected meetings. Giving his hand to his sister, Benjamin tenderly and carefully helped her down from the carriage, and then, smiling, gave her a sincere compliment, noting how beautiful and elegant she looked in her outfit, which emphasized her beauty. The lady really did look like a blue butterfly, gracefully fluttering in the air, and Benjamin would not allow anyone to be rude to her at the ball, because he was ready to defend her honor at any cost. The lady confidently stepped forward on her graceful foot, shod in a stylish shoe, and the woman's graceful movement, like a dance, attracted the attention of all those present, making them freeze in anticipation and admiration. The mother, who resembled her daughter in appearance, revealed that there would also be a second crown prince inside, who had a poor relationship with his older brother, adding further tension to the already complex family dynamics. With a smile on her face, Eli decided that she was looking forward to this meeting with the royal family, full of hope that they could mend fences and avoid all the misunderstandings that had separated them. The young girl was surprised to find herself tired, and with large red eyes full of questions, she looked at those around her, as if she were looking for answers to her own unsolvable riddles. The courtiers, noticing the unusual behavior of the princess, exchanged worried glances and asked if everything was okay with her, trying to find out what could have caused such agitation in their beloved ruler. A touching smile appeared on the little girl's lips, and with sincere curiosity, she asked if dear Rosalita was still alive. The girl's question contained the hope for a miracle and the restoration of the lost connection. Eli at this time felt uncomfortable surrounded by other aristocrats, as if she was out of place, and it seemed to her that all eyes were on her, filling the atmosphere with awkwardness and anxiety. The nobles hypocritically complimented her, although they had previously discussed her behind her back, and their false smiles only increased the aristocrats' feeling of awkwardness and distrust of their true intentions. The girl herself thought to herself that all this had finally stopped, and she hoped to quickly go back to the mansion where she could hide from hypocrisy and unnecessary attention in search of privacy and peace. All the luxury, jewelry, and decoration around her made her feel uneasy. These riches only emphasized her lack of comfort and made her feel like a stranger in this brilliant but cold world. Parents stood to the side, watching their children from afar, with slight concern on their faces, and also trying to assess how their offspring were coping with the challenges that social life presented them with. Suddenly, Benjamin appeared, putting his hand on his sister's shoulder, and with a warm smile noted that she looked genuinely happy, which seemed to give her even more self-confidence and joy. A minute later, when the nobles noticed the Marquise's son, they immediately clung to him like fireflies to the light, bombarding him with a multitude of questions and sincerely interested in his life and affairs, as if it were a rare fortune to communicate with him. Shielding his relative with his back, Benjamin said that he has been actively involved in charitable causes and events lately, demonstrating his good intentions and desire to help those in need. The man boasted of his extensive knowledge in various sciences and studies, proudly sharing his achievements and experience, as if he wanted to demonstrate his intellectual worth to those around him. The ladies quickly left when the nobleman began to tell boring things about mathematics and trigonometry, deciding that talking about such complex topics was not worth their precious time and interest. When asked by a relative what had just happened, Benjamin replied that he had noticed how others had become bored with his sister, and so he decided to intervene to help her diversify her communication and lift her spirits. When Eli hid behind him, the man only smiled and praised her with a kind smile, noting that the girl had handled the difficult situation so well, despite all the difficulties she had to face, and this inspired respect. The banquet was now over, and Benjamin, turning to the lady, pointed forward with his finger, where another man stood on the platform, calling her attention to an important point which seemed to have a special significance for their conversation. There, up there, a man stood and spoke, addressing the assembled crowd with confidence, his voice in such a way that it attracted everyone's attention and created an atmosphere of solemnity and importance for the moment. He was a nobleman of pleasant appearance. He was the husband of the empress, and at the same time the secretary of the empire, which gave him special authority and influence among those present at the banquets. He was the younger brother of the head of the Vermino family, and after his marriage to an attractive lady, he was granted the high title of Duke, which added even more status and influence to him in aristocratic circles. A small boy stood nearby, looking down sadly and without interest. It was the second Prince of Miles, who seemed quite out of place among the dull adults and the bright events around him. However, no one knew who the father of the first crown prince was, and this mystery remained secret, giving rise to many rumors and speculations among the courtiers who tried to unravel this intriguing question. Quietly, Benjamin whispered in his sister's ear that since the empress had given birth to a son, no one doubted that he was of royal blood, and this only fueled the interest and intrigue among the courtiers awaiting his future accomplishments, after which the guy added that when the first prince marries, then he will have all the rights to the throne, and this event will become a significant moment for the entire empire, because the choice of him will influence the future reign and the dynamics of power in the kingdom. The man was happy to become closer to the royal family, but he also hoped that Rosalita would find her happiness, because her joy and well-being were of great importance to him. Suddenly, a loud voice announced the arrival of the empress, and she walked in herself, magnificently dressed, in an exquisite outfit and a crown that sparkled in the candlelight, attracting the admiring glances of all present. Ares was an incredibly beautiful ruler, reminiscent of her sons, but her face showed fatigue, and there were noticeable dark circles under her eyes, indicating that she had been suffering from insomnia for a long time. With her dark gloved hand, she took a glass of champagne and, raising it up, attracted the attention of all the nobles, as if preparing to make a toast in honor of some important event or to welcome the guests gathered for this celebration. In a loud voice, the empress gave a toast in which she wished only prosperity for the empire, raising her glass in a sign of unity and hope for a bright future full of good fortune and well-being for all her subjects. Musical instruments began to sound, creating a vibrant atmosphere that filled the hall with lively melodies and lifting the mood of the guests, immersing them in the magic of this celebration. Benjamin smiled as he said that Princess Leia was due to appear soon, and his eyes sparkled with anticipation as her arrival promised to bring even more joy and intrigue to the festive atmosphere. The butlers grabbed the door handles, opening them to let the guests in, thus creating a dramatic entrance and filling the hall with the sounds of rustling clothes and soft footsteps of approaching people. And then, a little girl entered the hall, smiling cheerfully, with bright red eyes and dark hair. It was Leia, the only sorceress of the empire, whose charm and magic immediately attracted attention to herself. Leia, slightly embarrassed and with a blush on her cheeks, noticed her old friend, whom she had not seen for many years. She was standing nearby, and a warm wave of memories of old times suddenly flared up in the girl's heart. Without thinking, the little girl headed towards the Blue Princess, feeling a thrill and excitement in her heart, as if she herself had found herself in a fairy tale world full of magic. With a creepy smile on her face, the girl said that Ren said that she was dead, and her words sounded like they were hiding terrible secrets, causing everyone around her to freeze in fear and bewilderment. Eli silently watched the little girl being praised by the nobles, who enthusiastically discussed her charm and innocence. Her gaze was full of different feelings, because she understood that among the approving words, there were hidden both envy and doubt. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, Lady Vermino appeared, asking with interest what had happened to the lady's face, how she could have defamed the goddess. Her thin voice sounded with slight irony, and her gaze slid penetratingly over those gathered. When the aristocrat asked about the search for the fugitive artist, Eli promised that she would tell about it later, leaving everyone in tense anticipation. The mysterious answer only sparked the interest of her friend. The maiden's mouth dropped open in mute surprise when she heard from the noblewoman that Rosalita had previously been the princess's etiquette teacher, and this revelation made her wonder about the secrets hidden behind such a noble past. Leah walked with an easy gait, smiling and waving at the other aristocrats in greeting, radiating a confidence and charm that drew the attention of those around her. Looking at her upset, bowed-down friend, Maria said that in the past, Eli was like a nanny for a little girl, and her kindness and care left an unforgettable mark on the child's heart. The little girl bowed before the empress and spoke tenderly, asking her not to forget about her health, while expressing sincere concern for the well-being of this majestic woman. The ruler of the country placed her hand on the girl's head and announced that she had prepared a short performance for the assembled group. Her voice sounded warm and caring, as if giving everyone present moments of magic and joy. Leah said that she needed help for this, and without thinking, she pointed her hand at her former mentor, who was standing nearby, adding that she was the best fit for this role. With a sweet smile on her face and hope in her eyes, the girl carefully asked the woman to help her with her small request, explaining how important it was to her. Eli froze with her mouth open, not understanding how she could refuse when there were other people around, and a feeling of obligation arose in her heart that left her with no choice. One of the servants politely handed the glass of drink to the lady. His manner was impeccable, and his movements were refined, which emphasized the aura of sophistication and nobility in the room. Eli accepted the glass of drink and, smiling slightly, headed towards the little girl, her confidence and determination giving her a special charisma at that moment. The girl, excitedly raising her hand up, asked her mentor to stop and not move from the spot, while she herself prepared to perform magic, filling the air around her with an atmosphere of anticipation and magic. Leah, closing her eyes, Derman immersed herself in the world of magic, and her hands began to glow like stars in the night sky, leaving behind sparkling runes that swirled smoothly in the air. Soon the magic filled the entire room, filling it with light streams that danced smoothly in the air and created an atmosphere of incredible magical splendor. The red liquid in the glass began to slowly swirl like a living creature, creating mesmerizing swirls and reflecting the shimmering light that played on the walls around, giving the room a mysterious feel. The nobles, covering their mouths with their hands, could not believe their eyes, amazed at what was unfolding before them. Their faces expressed admiration and bewilderment. They became witnesses to an incredible miracle, capable of turning all their ideas about reality upside down. The red drops rose into the air like living creatures, dancing and spinning on their own, leaving bright traces behind them and creating the effect that the air was filled with magic, enchanting everyone around. A huge red dragon appeared in the air, ominous and majestic, emitting a powerful aura that filled the space around it with a sense of fear and trepidation. Eli opened her mouth in horror and fear, but the words stuck in her throat like a barrier, preventing her from expressing her emotions. She could only silently watch what was happening, feeling a cold sweat run down her back. Suddenly, a wizard appeared, and at that moment, the dragon, possessing terrible strength, could break out of its tree confinement. Then, perhaps, in the future, the whole city would face war and destruction, threatening the peace and peaceful life of its inhabitants. The nobles, covering their mouths with their hands, could not believe their eyes, amazed at what was unfolding before them. Their faces expressed admiration and bewilderment. They became witnesses to an incredible miracle, capable of turning all their ideas about reality upside down. The red drops rose into the air like living creatures, dancing and spinning on their own, leaving bright traces behind them and creating the effect that the air was filled with magic, enchanting everyone around. A huge red dragon appeared in the air, ominous and majestic, emitting a powerful aura that filled the space around it with a sense of fear and trepidation. Eli opened her mouth in horror and fear, but the words stuck in her throat like a barrier, preventing her from expressing her emotions. She could only silently watch what was happening, feeling a cold sweat run down her back. Suddenly, a wizard appeared, and at that moment, the dragon, possessing terrible strength, could break out of its tree confinement. Then, perhaps,